What if I told you that the quaint image of chivalrous knights and fair maidens is a monstrous lie, a dark fairy tale smeared with blood and guts? When the trumpets blare and swords clash, it's not a dance, it's a grotesque ballet of chaos, where hope dangles like a severed head. You think you'd thrive in that savage pandemonium? Think again. Picture this, a muddy field littered with the remnants of arrogance, crimson-stained armor, shattered shields, the remnants of once proud warriors reduced to mere husks. Every heartbeat is a countdown to oblivion. A man, not a hero, stands with sweat-soaked hair clinging to his brow, sweat mingling with the stench of fear and desperation. He grips a sword, not as a noble knight but as a desperate soul clinging to the last flicker of survival. You think your smartphone is essential? In that hellscape, it's nothing more than a useless brick. Imagine dodging arrows that slice through the air like angry hornets. One moment of hesitation, and you become a target, a living target practice for bloodthirsty archers whose laughter echoes like thunder. And let's not forget the grim spectacle of the battlefield, limbs scattered like discarded toys, faces twisted in eternal agony, as warriors roar in a cacophony of rage and fear. This isn't a history lesson, it's a horror show, and you're the unwitting star. In the flickering torchlight of a savage camp, men plot their grim strategies with the same fervor that a modern stockbroker whispers about the next big investment. Betrayal simmers just under the surface, and the line between ally and enemy blurs like the smoke of burning flesh. Who can you trust when loyalty is a quicksilver promise? The chilling truth, the battlefield isn't about valor, it's a meat grinder of ambition and cowardice. Do you know the toll of a sword's bite? It's not just the pain, it's the way your life flashes before your eyes, a cruel montage of regrets wrapped in the scent of iron and dirt. When a knight's shield splinters under the weight of a battle axe, it's not a glorious moment, it's an invitation to the abyss. You'd think you'd fight bravely, but what if your legs turn to jelly, your courage evaporating like morning mist? You'd be nothing more than another casualty, another forgotten name etched in the dirt. The battlefield is a brutal classroom, teaching lessons in the most visceral way possible. Each clash of steel is a reminder, victory is an illusion, and glory is a cruel joke. Think you'd rise to legend? In those heart-stopping moments, when the air thickens with the screams of the dying, even the bravest turn to flee. So, are you still convinced you'd survive? Or has the seductive thrill of the unknown curdled into the bitter taste of dread? Welcome to a world where survival is not a right, but a fleeting whisper, an echo lost in the cacophony of chaos. The air was thick with the stench of sweat and steel, the ground beneath my feet trembling under the weight of 1,000 boots, the heartbeat of a nation pounding in my ears. I remember the sky, a bruised canvas of grey and black, pregnant with thunder, as the sun surrendered its light to the advancing storm of war. Panic wrapped its fingers around my throat, squeezing tight, as I stood among men who were once brothers, now mere shadows of their former selves, each face a fragile mask of fear, rage, and unspoken dread. Joffrey! The voice sliced through the chaos, sharp as a blade. It was Richard, my childhood friend, his eyes wide, haunted like those of a ghost. Blood had already begun to seep through the bandage around his arm, a gruesome reminder of our fragile mortality. We can't let them break our lines. He was shouting, but I could barely hear him over the cacophony, a symphony of clashing swords, the cries of the dying, the rhythmic thump of war drums that drummed not just against the earth but against the very core of my being. I remember the moment when the world became an echo, faint yet deafening. The clash of metal sang a cruel lullaby as I ran, heart racing, toward a fortress of fear that loomed ahead, dark and foreboding. This battlefield, this patch of earth, would soon be a tapestry of despair. I could see it, the bodies, the blood, the memories that would never bloom again. A fleeting thought danced in my mind, does the ground we stand upon remember our names? Richard's voice broke through again, remember old Kieran? He said the land can hold our stories, even when we're gone. I wanted to laugh, a bitter sound, but the mirth was buried beneath layers of dread. Old Kieran, with his crooked smile and tales of valor, would never share another story with us again. War was not the romantic adventure he made it out to be, it was a grave, a relentless maw that swallowed dreams whole. And then there was Eliza. My heart twisted as I thought of her, a flickering candle in my mind, her laughter a melody now drowned out by the ragged cries of men turning on one another. She'd begged me not to go, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, the weight of her pleas wrapping around my heart tighter than any chain. I had promised her I would return, that I would fight to keep the light of our lives alive. But the battlefield held no promises, only shattered dreams and whispered regrets. There was a sudden surge, a tide of bodies crashing into one another, and I felt Richard at my side, his sword raised, fear melding into fury. For our families, he bellowed, a war cry soaked in desperate hope. As if to challenge fate itself, we charged, two hearts racing against the inevitable. I remember the taste of adrenaline on my tongue, sharp and metallic, echoing the taste of fear, my fear, Richard's fear, the fear of countless souls spiraling into the abyss. Time twisted, each second stretching into eternity as I swung my sword, the blade a glimmering whisper of death. I could see the faces of my enemies, men just like me, their eyes filled with the same panic, the same longing for home. We were all woven from the same cloth, yet here we were, ripping each other apart on this wretched ground, where grass would be forever stained with sorrow. "Joffrey!" Richard called again, his voice straining, the sound swallowed by the chaos. I turned, just in time to see him stumble, a dark figure looming over him, weapon raised, a spectre of death. My heart stopped, time folding in on itself. I moved, instinct taking over, but the world slowed, and I felt the weight of reality crash upon me. I remember the flash of steel, the sickening thud, the way the light faded from Richard's eyes. "No!" I screamed, a raw, primal sound that tore through the din of battle. It wasn't just a word, it was a plea, a lament, a desperate wish to turn back the clock. But time is relentless, a cruel mistress, and the battlefield swallowed Richard's life, leaving only the echo of his laughter in my mind, a bittersweet memory etched into my heart like a scar. In the wake of his loss, the battlefield transformed. The pounding drums grew softer, replaced by the eerie silence of absence. Around me, shadows flickered, ghostly forms of men who had once stood beside me now lay motionless, their stories snuffed out, like candles extinguished in an unforgiving wind. I staggered back, the landscape of war morphing from chaos to haunting stillness. The earth, now drenched in blood, felt like a grave, a repository of sorrow. I remember the weight of the sky pressing down on my shoulders, as if the heavens themselves mourned the lives lost, the dreams extinguished. I was a witness to the unfathomable, a silent confessor to the madness, the absurdity of men tearing each other apart over land and honor, forgetting that love and laughter could exist in abundance if only we chose to let go of our swords. In that moment of stillness, I stood alone, a lone figure against the backdrop of a battlefield that had become a graveyard. The air crackled with the remnants of fear and fury, and whispers of the fallen brushed against my skin like a chilling wind, reminding me that this landscape was not just an expanse of dirt and stone, but a tapestry woven with the threads of countless lives. It was heavy with the weight of history, a cosmic truth that loomed larger than any man could comprehend. And as I looked out over the devastation, the bodies, the echoes of laughter lost in the clamor of death, I realized that war was not just a clash of swords, it was the silence of dreams unfulfilled, the haunting cries of those who could not return to their loved ones, the stories that would never be told. Each heartbeat a reminder, each breath a struggle against the despair that threatened to engulf me. I closed my eyes, the world spinning around me, and I could hear them, ghosts of the past whispering in the shadows, carrying with them the weight of unfulfilled promises and dreams scattered like ashes in the wind. In this landscape of war, I was but a flicker of life suspended in a moment of eternity, a reminder that even amidst the darkness, the light of memory would forever flicker, hauntingly beautiful and achingly tragic. The air was thick with the scent of earth, sweat, and fear, and miasma swirling around the soldiers as they crouched, hearts pounding like war drums. I could almost hear the distant thrum of hooves, the chilling wail of a clarion call. A shadow darted across the hallowed ground, a reminder that beneath the surface lay a battlefield hungry for blood. The hills rose like the backs of sleeping giants, their contours betraying no hint of the carnage that was about to unfold. I remember the way the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting an orange hue that turned the fields into a canvas of gore before the battle even began. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood Ilara, her brow furrowed, fierce and unyielding, yet her hands trembled. She had always been the strategist, mapping out victories like an artist, yet now she felt like a child playing with the fire of a war she'd never truly understood until this moment. The terrain loomed large, a restless creature beneath her feet, whispering secrets of centuries past. "Hold the ridge," she whispered, and I could see the weight of every word pressed down on her chest like a stone. She understood the land, the way the trees twisted like the gnarled fingers of long-dead warriors, the way the river curled into the valley, a serpent ready to swallow the unwary. It was her battlefield as much as it was theirs, and she felt every pulse of the earth in her bones. Yet, the very geography that once felt like an ally now seemed to conspire against her. The shadows crept in, the trees loomed, and she felt like a pawn in a game where the pieces were already falling around her. Beside her, Tobias stood, a soldier born of grit and desperation, his breath ragged as he clutched his sword. He was a man of simple pleasures, the taste of stale bread, a smile from a stranger, the fleeting warmth of a woman's embrace. But war had peeled away the layers of his innocence, leaving a raw, exposed heart that beat only for survival. He had always been the one who fought for the brothers at his side, the one who would charge into the fray without a second thought. But now, as he surveyed the undulating hills, he felt a deep, gnawing fear. He didn't fear death, he feared the loneliness that came with it. "I remember," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely a whisper, the laughter by the fire, the stories spun like webs. Memories flickered like fireflies, illuminating the dark corners of his mind, and yet the shadows closed in again. The battlefield would not just take flesh, it would take memories, dreams, and the warmth of every moment that made life sweet. And then there was Rhea, the medic, a fierce spirit bound to a body worn by the weight of countless lives saved and lost. The earth was her canvas, yet the stains upon it were painted in shades of red that could never wash away. She moved through the lines of soldiers, her hand steady despite the tremors of her heart. "You're going to be all right," she said often, her voice a soothing balm, but she could feel the truth like a knife in her gut, they weren't all going to be all right. The terrain stretched out, a labyrinth of horrors waiting to ensnare the unwary. Would she be able to save them? As the cacophony of hooves drew nearer, Ilara's chest tightened. "We can't hold the ridge. It's too exposed," she shouted over the rising tide of panic, the realization crashing over her like a tidal wave. "The valley is a trap, they'll outflank us." But her voice was lost to the clamor, drowned in the chaotic symphony of clashing steel and ringing cries. Tobias turned to her, his eyes wide, a mirror of the turmoil within. "What do we do?" he asked, desperation lacing every syllable. The burden of their choices weighed heavily, suffocating. "Trust the land," she replied, a flicker of hope sparking within her. "Use the trees. Use the river. We'll draw them in close, then strike." Yet, doubt gnawed at her resolve. The very terrain that could protect them felt like a treacherous ally. What if it betrayed them instead? "I remember," Tobias interjected, his voice rising, passion igniting a fire within. "I remember the way the hills sang when the sun kissed their peaks. We can use that. We can draw them into the shadows, make them fight where they can't see." The warmth of his memories clashed with the cold reality surrounding them. But what if those hills that had once sung became their tombstones? As they drew up their strategies amidst the chaos, Rhea knelt beside a fallen comrade, her hands trembling as she pressed cloth to the raw wound, soaking in the blood that seeped like a dark promise. "Stay with me," she pleaded, her heart breaking as she looked into unseeing eyes. This is the price of war, she thought. The land beneath her was a graveyard, a reminder of the price of loyalty and courage. Time slipped like grains of sand through fingers, each moment stretching, pulling. The horizon darkened, shadows swallowing the light as they prepared for the onslaught. The weight of the earth felt like a heartbeat, echoing in tandem with their own. Each beat a reminder of their mortality, each breath a fleeting moment standing at the edge of a chasm. "Ready." Ilara's voice was a whisper, nearly lost in the gathering storm. The uncertainty hung heavy, a palpable tension, electrifying the air. "Yes," Tobias said, and though his voice wavered, his fists tightened around the hilt of his sword, the fear igniting a flame of resolve. "Always," Rhea added, clenching her jaw, determination etched across her face like a monument against despair. And then, the earth itself seemed to shudder as the first wave crashed against them, a tsunami of chaos rolling down the hill, relentless and unyielding. The trees writhed, and the valley roared as they collided with the fury of men and the strategy of terrain, a primal dance of survival where instincts clashed with intelligence. In that moment, the geography was no longer just a backdrop, it was a living entity, a witness to their struggle. The hills watched, the shadows danced, and the river whispered secrets of those who fought before. Time lost all meaning, the past bled into the present, and the future hung by a thread, taut and trembling. I stood there, feeling the ground pulse beneath me, the echoes of history reverberating through my bones. The battle was not just for land, but for souls, for memories, for the very essence of what it meant to exist. It was a raw, unfiltered glimpse into the heart of humanity, where fear, hope, and courage intertwined like roots beneath the surface, unseen but perfectly connected. And as the clash erupted into a cacophony of violence, I realized that this was just the beginning, a loop of agony and triumph, spiraling into a horizon fraught with uncertainty, where the land would continue to bleed, and the ghosts of those who fought would always linger, forever entwined with the scars of the earth. The clang of steel reverberates in the air, a cruel orchestra of metal on metal, echoing across the blood-stained field. I stand at the edge of the chaos, heart pounding in my chest, each beat a drum announcing impending doom. The sun dips low, casting long shadows that dance like wraiths, whispering secrets of those who have fallen. A body, no, two, collapses nearby, their faces contorted in eternal screams. I remember the taste of iron and ash, the scent of fear thick like smoke. Sir Aldrich, my brother in arms, screams, a sound that slices through the cacophony like a sword through flesh. I see him, his armor battered, his once golden plume now a grim testament to war's relentless toll. He fights not merely for glory, but for redemption, haunted by choices that churn within him like a tempest. The shadows of his past flicker at the edges of his mind, a painful reminder of what he lost in the fires of ambition. Cassandra, he bellows into the night, the name a prayer, a curse, a lifeline. And there she is, Cassandra, her spirit fierce, unyielding, yet her heart wears a crown of thorns. She stands on the periphery, eyes wide, watching the brutality unfold. Her hands tremble, clutching the hilt of a dagger, the weight of destiny heavy upon her. She remembers the day she chose to break free from the shackles of expectation, to become more than a pawn in someone else's game. But now that choice feels like a curse, her heart torn between duty and love, loyalty and betrayal. The screams of the wounded rise like a haunting refrain, an echo of lives interrupted, hopes extinguished. I step forward, drawn into the fray, adrenaline surging through my veins, a war song pulsing in my ears. Every clash of blades sends shockwaves through my soul, each splash of crimson a reminder that this is not just a battle, it's a reckoning. I can taste the fear around me, impalpable and suffocating, a thick fog that clouds judgment. In the distance, I see him, Lord Cedric, the rival knight, his face a mask of ferocity and pride. He thrives in this moment of chaos, a predator among prey, eyes glinting with the thrill of combat. I remember the stories whispered in taverns, of his insatiable hunger for power, of the blood he spills as casually as one might shed a coat. He fights not for honor, but for a kingdom built on the bones of the vanquished. His laughter, a dark melody, reaches my ears, sending shivers down my spine. Aldrich charges toward him, a storm of rage and regret, but I scream, "Wait! Don't!" My voice is lost in the tempest of battle, overshadowed by the clangor of war. It is a moment stretched into eternity, the world narrowing to a single heartbeat, a single breath. I see Aldrich's resolve, feel the weight of his history in that moment. He is not just a knight, he is a man. Burdened. Broken. Hopeful. The clash resonates, a meeting of fates. Steel meets steel, a dance of death that sends ripples through the fabric of their lives. I can see it in their eyes, the fury, the fear, the fragility of what they once held dear. I remember the night spent under starlit skies, dreaming of honor and glory as if they were tangible treasures. But here, in this wretched mire of blood, they become fleeting whispers, ghosts that slip through fingers stained with regret. As the sky darkens, a storm brews above us, mirroring the tempest below. The air crackles with tension, a prelude to something greater. Cassandra steps forward, her voice rising above the din, her words like arrows finding their target. Stop! This is madness. The tempest stills momentarily, the clashing swords freezing in mid-air as if time itself holds its breath. Her eyes pierce through the veil of rage, seeking the hearts of those present. I feel the weight of her gaze, a beacon in the chaos. But the moment shatters as Cedric lunges, a serpent striking its prey. Aldrich reacts, a whirlwind of instinct, but it is too late. The dagger finds flesh, and with it, a gasp that echoes like the tolling of a bell. No! I scream, the word tearing through me like a blade, a visceral cry of desperation. Time stretches, each second morphing into an eternity as I reach for Aldrich, my hand grasping nothing but cold air, the distance between us a chasm carved by fate itself. He crumples, a fallen star, and in that moment, I feel the vacuum of loss envelop me, a hollow ache that swallows the light. Cassandra falls to her knees beside him, cradling his head, her tears carving paths through the dirt on her cheeks. Stay with me, she pleads, voice breaking like glass. The night holds its breath, a collective pause, as if the universe has still to bear witness to this heartbreak. Aldrich's eyes flicker with a mix of recognition and regret, memories flashing behind them like shooting stars. I watch as he reaches for Cassandra's hand, fingers trembling, desperate to connect. It is a moment of pure humanity amidst the chaos, flawed, raw, achingly beautiful. As the battle rages on, the carnage around us becomes a tapestry of sorrow and fury, a mosaic of shattered dreams and lost hopes. I stand, paralyzed, trapped in this moment, where love and war collide like thunderclouds in a storm. The air grows heavy with the scent of blood and despair, but within that maelstrom lies an undeniable truth: we are warriors, yes, but we are also human, and love is our greatest battle. The ground shakes, and I realize, this is not just a battlefield. This is our lives unfurling, each moment a fraction of time, a thread in a tapestry woven with pain and passion. The clock ticks, relentless, reminding us that time waits for no one. As I stand at the precipice of this chaos, I know deep within that the fight is not over, the shadows will linger, and the echoes of our choices will haunt us long after the swords are sheathed. And so, with fists clenched and hearts on the line, we step forward into the dark. Because even in the face of despair, we are compelled to forge ahead, to confront the ghosts of our past, to embrace the flame that flickers dimly in the distance. The battlefield becomes our canvas, and we are both the artists and the art, crafting our legacies with every breath, every heartbeat. The battle continues, and with it, our stories intertwine, forever etched in the tapestry of time. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and fear, the cacophony of clashing steel echoing through the narrow streets like the heartbeat of a city caught in the throes of chaos. I stood there, heart racing as if it could outrun the horrors unfolding before me. The sun hung low, casting a golden haze over the blood-soaked cobblestones, as the cries of the wounded twisted through the dense atmosphere, a symphony of despair, punctuated by the desperate screams of mothers searching for lost children. And there, in the midst of it all, the knightly class emerged like shadows made flesh, armored giants with hearts of iron, dragging the weight of their oaths behind them. I remember the first time I saw Sir Alaric, his armor glinting with a promise he was yet to fulfill. He moved through the throng, a predator in a world that had forgotten the meaning of mercy. He was noble, yes, but beneath the layers of steel lay a heart that thudded with doubt. I could see it in the way his eyes darted, searching, yearning for a reason to fight, a reason that stretched beyond the call of bloodshed. He was haunted, a spectre of honor and fear standing against an unseen tide. Beside him, Edda, the archer, nimbly navigated the chaos, drawing her bowstring tighter with every heartbeat, her fingers trembling not from fear, but from the weight of expectation. I caught a glimpse of her face, streaked with grime, a mixture of defiance and determination. She had once dreamt of glory, delighting in tales of heroism and the sweet taste of victory. But now, each arrow she loosed was a plea, an echo of lost dreams. She was a child molded by war, and yet, even in her youth, she bore scars that spoke of battles fought long before her feet touched the ground. "Alaric," she shouted, her voice cutting through the din like a blade, desperation woven into the fabric of her plea. "We need to regroup." I remember the way his eyes narrowed, the vulnerability masked by that facade of bravado. Each soldier around him looked to him for guidance, their lives swinging on the flimsy thread of his resolve. A knight. An ideal. But ideals crumble under pressure, and the weight of that truth bore down on him. He was a warrior, but he was also just a man. Fear clawed at his insides, twisting like a serpent, gnawing at the edges of his certainty. "Push forward," he roared, but the words felt hollow, echoing off the stone walls like a ghost of what once was. The foot soldiers surged behind him, grim-faced men who had once sworn fealty to dreams of glory now caught in a nightmare of blood and ash. They were a ragtag collection of farmers and merchants turned fighters, their eyes wide with horror as the reality of war settled upon their shoulders. They marched, not so much for honor as for survival, their belief in noble causes wilting like leaves in the relentless sun. And then there were the mercenaries, those sinister specters who roamed the battlefield with a gleam in their eyes, their loyalty bought by coin and promises whispered in the dark. They laughed as they fought, a cruel melody of chaos that rang out amidst the wailing. To them, death was just another transaction. They bore a different kind of armor, one forged in the fires of self-preservation. I felt a chill creep up my spine. They were the shadows of humanity, reminding us all of the fickle nature of loyalty. "Do you think they'll remember us?" Edda whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the storm. I wanted to tell her yes, that we were all living in a tale, but the truth tasted bitter on my tongue. There were no tales in war, only memories fading into the dark. I watched as she loosed another arrow, the fletching whispering promises of vengeance. But I knew those arrows could not pierce the veil of despair that cloaked the battlefield. The ground trembled beneath us, the earth itself caught in the grip of conflict. I felt it then, that pulse of the world, a shared heartbeat of dread and defiance. We were but players trapped in a grim play, each of us yearning for an ending that would never come. In the distance, the wail of a horn shattered the air, a sound that hinted at something darker. The tide was shifting. The enemy advanced, a wall of armor and malice. I watched as Alaric's shoulders squared, a knight destined to face a storm. I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, but also the spark of resolve igniting like the last flicker of a dying flame. "Edda," he called, the storm of his voice breaking through the haze of fear. "Stand with me." There was a moment, a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, where the world held its breath. She nodded, a fierce light igniting in her gaze, and I felt the weight of their unspoken bond, a knight and an archer, standing together against the tide of inevitable darkness. Time felt warped, a twisted reflection of reality as I stood there, caught in the web of their fate. I remembered a story told long ago, a tale of glory and honor under a sky heavy with stars. But this was not that tale. This was a dance with death, a cruel jest played by fate. With a sharp intake of breath, Alaric charged forward, sword raised high, and I could almost hear the battle cry of his ancestors ringing in my ears. Edda followed, bowstring taut, arrows aimed not just at enemies, but at the very idea of despair. And just like that, the moment shattered, plunging us into the chaos of war, where the cries of the desperate mingled with the laughter of mercenaries, and the echoes of forgotten dreams flickered in and out of focus like ghosts on a battlefield soaked in blood. I understood then, this was not just the rise of knights and soldiers, it was a jigsaw puzzle, pieces scattered across the landscape of life. The battlefield was alive, an organism of fear and hope, churning endlessly, weaving the threads of fate into a tapestry both beautiful and terrifying. And standing there, amid sword and shadow, fear and fire, I felt the pulse of history entwine with my own heart, a relentless rhythm, a reminder that this story was far from over, that the next chapter loomed just beyond the horizon, waiting for us to step into the fray once more. The deafening silence shattered as the first bullet pierced the air, a crack that resonated deep within my chest. I remember the moments that followed, each sharp snap echoing like a heartbeat, like a countdown to catastrophe. The sun hung low, a fading ember, casting long shadows across the battlefield where lives were reduced to mere numbers, mere echoes of laughter and dreams. Darkness lingered, creeping in with the scent of gunpowder and blood, clinging to the throat like an unshakable memory. I remember Anna, her hands trembling as she clutched the rifle, a weapon that felt heavier than her sorrow. A soldier, yes, but a mother first. Each time she pulled the trigger, a piece of her soul shattered, a quiet prayer whispered in the chaos, for her son, who waited in a faraway town, unaware of the horrors she faced. "I'm doing this for you," she would murmur, but the words tasted like ash. She fought for a future, yet each shot tore at the fabric of her hopes, unraveling her dreams into the dirt. And there was Marcus, a young man with eyes that mirrored the tempest of the skies. He had enlisted out of a sense of duty, convinced that valor was a virtue. But standing beside Anna, surrounded by the acrid stench of death, he questioned everything. "What is the price of honor?" he shouted into the void, his voice a raw edge, a desperate plea against the backdrop of carnage. He had seen his friends fall, bodies crumpled like discarded dreams, and each loss clawed at his sanity. I remember the night before the battle, a fragile moment of stillness punctuated by the distant lullabies of the past, a time when laughter echoed through hallways, when love felt invincible. We shared stories under a blanket of stars, the cosmos a witness to our pain. "If I don't make it back," Marcus had begun, but Anna's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with fierce urgency. "You will. We are stronger than this," she insisted, but the shadows loomed, whispering doubts. Now, in the chaos, the whispers turned into screams. The ground trembled beneath their feet as artillery erupted, the earth itself shuddering in agony. I could feel it, the weight of the world pressing down on their shoulders, the burden of decisions that felt impossible. Each explosion was like a heartbeat, a reminder that time was slipping away, that lives hung in the balance, waiting for a decision as a clock ticked ominously in the back of their minds. "Fight for your life or be swallowed whole," Anna breathed, her voice a sharp edge against the din. And yet, even as she rallied herself, I could see the cracks in her resolve, the flickering doubt in her eyes. The rifle felt like a stranger in her hands, an extension of a warrior persona she never wanted to embrace. "This isn't who I am," she thought, yet the battle raged on, demanding a version of herself she never sought. Marcus, too, felt the weight of expectation. He had joined with dreams of glory, but as he aimed his weapon, it became a tool of despair rather than triumph. What do we become, he wondered, lost in the churning fog of war? The faces of those he loved haunted him, their laughter morphing into echoes of sorrow. The memories wrapped around him like chains, each link forged in fragility, each link a ghost that whispered of consequences. The first wave hit with a brutality that shattered the night. Bodies fell, laughter turned into screams, and for a moment, time suspended. Anna pulled the trigger, her heart shattering as she felt the life slip away, a life extinguished. She held on to the hope that it was necessary, that it was right. For my son," she repeated, but her voice faltered under the weight of reality. And as the chaos enveloped her, she realized each shot was a farewell to a piece of herself. As the smoke cleared, Marcus found himself face to face with an enemy, a boy no older than he, terrified and trembling. "Please, I don't want to die," the boy whimpered, and in that moment, Marcus felt the world collapse. The boy's life flickered before him like a distant star, and Marcus stood paralyzed, weapon raised yet heart heavy. "What have we become?" he cried, the reality crashing in like waves against a shore, unyielding, relentless. The air thickened with tension as the ground surged beneath them, a battleground twisted into a macabre dance. Anna stumbled, her rifle shaking, caught between the instinct to protect and the agony of her choices. What is a soldier if not a monster in disguise, she thought, the question carving deeper into her soul. Each moment was a ticking bomb, the anxiety clenching around her throat like a noose. The confrontation loomed like a storm cloud, dark and foreboding. The cacophony of war crescendoed around them, a deafening symphony of loss and desperation. I could feel the air crackle with electricity as bodies collided, dreams shattering in an instant. "We fight not for victory but survival," Marcus yelled, and Anna echoed the sentiment, but both felt the hollowness of their words. What were they fighting for? Each heartbeat felt like a question, each breath a reminder that they were lost, tangled in a web of conflict and chaos. There was a flicker of hope, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to themselves. But as the weapons of war clashed, so too did their spirits, the intensity of emotion spiraling, a tempest threatening to consume them whole. And then, just as quickly as the night had engulfed them, dawn broke, a soft light creeping through the darkness, a fragile reminder of what remained. I remember the silence that followed the battle, the haunting stillness, and the realization that some ghosts never truly left. Anna stood, rifle clutched in her hands, heartbroken but resolute. Marcus, battered but unbroken, stared into the horizon, where the sun slowly rose, a phoenix born of ashes. But the war was far from over. The weapons would always remain, waiting in the shadows, tools of a trade that held too much weight. And I could feel it all, the pulse of life, the echo of memories, the shards of dreams, and as they stood there, I knew this was just the beginning. The clang of metal echoed through the air, a sound so primal, it could shatter the veil of sanity. I stood frozen, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest, as corpses littered the ground, little more than discarded dolls with their dreams suddenly snatched away. The sun hung low, casting a macabre glow on the blood-slicked earth, where blades glistened like hungry snakes, waiting for the next moment of carnage. Swords, shields, and the grotesque remnants of humanity lay tangled in a grotesque dance of death. I remember the first time I held a sword, its weight a promise, a curse. The cold grip of iron vibrated with the echoes of past battles, the phantoms of warriors long gone whispering through the blade's edge. I was barely a boy then, fumbling and awkward, but the allure of violence wrapped around me like a lover's embrace, intoxicating. I remember the sound, the swishing of the blade as it sliced through the air, the sickening thud as it struck home. Each swing of the sword was a heartbeat, a desperate plea for validation, a fragile attempt to prove my worth in a world that craved blood. Beside me, Roderick stood, his face a mask of grim determination. He was my brother, my anchor, yet in this moment, he seemed a ghost, a spectre tainted by the grim realities of war. His shield, a battered remnant of glory, had once been a symbol of protection, now reduced to a mere obstacle in the dance of chaos. I could see the tremble in his hand as he gripped the shield, a reflection of the fear we both felt, clawing at our insides. Roderick had always been the brave one, the one to leap into battle, yet today, I sensed a fracture in his spirit. He wasn't just fighting the enemy, he was battling his demons, and they were winning. "Stay close," he barked, but his voice wavered, betraying an uncertainty that sent chills down my spine. The ground trembled beneath us, a prelude to the storm brewing in the distance. It was more than just the rumble of approaching siege engines, it was the sound of fate, a heavy clock ticking down to its inevitable end. And there, looming like a malignant tumor on the horizon, were the siege engines. Massive wooden behemoths, their crude exteriors a testament to the savagery they wrought. I could almost hear their groans, pained and angry, as if the very timber had absorbed the anguish of every soul it had crushed. Each time a projectile soared through the air, it felt like a dagger through the heart of our cause, a reminder that we were mere pawns in a game played by gods too indifferent to care. Then there was Elira. Oh, Elira! The way she moved through the chaos was an ethereal dream, a tragic ballet beneath the twisted branches of war. Her crossbow, her beloved companion, was an extension of her being, a weapon that harnessed her rage and heartbreak. I could see it in her eyes, the way they burned with a ferocity that belied her delicate frame. She was a tempest, a storm trapped in a fragile body, and the world had pushed her too far. With each bolt she shot, I felt the weight of her sorrow cascading through the air, an unrelenting barrage against the universe that had wronged her. "Focus, Elira! Keep your aim steady!" Roderick shouted, but I knew she was aiming at more than just the enemy. Each pull of the trigger was a release, a momentary grasp at control in a world spiraling into madness. I remember her laughter, a haunting melody that lingered long after the arrows pierced flesh. "Death is a dance, my dears," she used to say, "and I intend to lead." Yet here we were, at the precipice of destruction, the air thick with the scent of impending doom. I could hear the distant cries of agony and the wet, slapping sound of flesh against metal, a grotesque symphony that would haunt my dreams. In that cacophony, I felt the pulsing weight of time, relentless and unforgiving, ticking away the seconds until we would either taste victory or drown in despair. As I gripped my sword tighter, I thought of my mother. I could almost see her face, soft and radiant, her laughter like a balm on my battered heart. "You're a warrior, my darling," she would whisper, "but remember, even warriors bleed." Every drop of blood spilled here was not just an offering to the gods of war, but a piece of ourselves, a sacrifice made on the altar of pride and ambition. The ground shook again, but it wasn't just the siege engines. It was our fear, manifesting itself into a tangible wave that surged through us, threatening to swallow us whole. My breath caught as Roderick's eyes widened in horror. "Look," he yelled, pointing toward the horizon where the enemy surged forward, a tide of savagery hungry for conquest. In that moment, I realized we were not just fighting for territory, we were fighting for our very souls. The weaponry around us, swords that could sever bonds, shields that could create barriers, became symbols of our emotional turmoil. Each clash of steel echoed our internal strife, a cacophony of doubt and desperation. Elira let loose another bolt, and I watched as it found its mark, a twisted smile breaking across her face. She was alive in this chaos, and in her fierce determination, I felt a flicker of hope, a fragile flame against the encroaching dark. "We fight for those who can't," she cried, her voice carrying above the din, a rallying cry woven with both sorrow and strength. I remember the weight of my sword, the burden of expectation pressing down like a lead weight. I was not just a fighter, I was my family's legacy, a broken history stitched together with fear and hope. Each swing of the blade was a prayer, a scream against the void that threatened to engulf us. And as the first enemy fell, the world exploded around us, a storm of fury and blood, an unending torrent of chaos and longing. With each heartbeat, the battle raged on, intertwining our fates, binding us not just as comrades but as a tapestry of scars and dreams. The night was darkening, the shadows creeping closer, but in that moment, we were alive, and against all odds, we would face what came next. The clash of metal rang out, a melody of despair and defiance, binding us together in this haunting dance of survival. And as I braced for impact, I felt the pulse of history beneath my feet, a reminder that in this examination of weaponry, we were not merely soldiers. We were stories waiting to be told, truths waiting to be unearthed, flawed, beautiful, and impossibly human. The clang of metal echoed through the dusk of a forgotten battlefield, a chilling symphony of chaos and dread. I stood there, heart pounding, in the thick of it, the air heavy with the scent of sweat and impending doom. Shadows danced around me, flickering like the last embers of a fire long extinguished. Beneath the weight of my armor, each piece, a breastplate here, greaves there, felt like a shackle. This was not protection, it was a prison forged in fear. I remembered it all too vividly, the faces of the fallen, their eyes wide with disbelief, their dreams extinguished in an instant. Henry was beside me, a man forged from laughter and light, now a mere echo of himself. His eyes, once bright with mischief, now dulled by the weight of survival. He wielded a sword, not just of steel but of desperation, each swing a prayer for salvation. "We fight for honor," he shouted, though even he doubted the truth of it. Honor was a ghost in the fog, a whisper of a time when we believed in valor, a notion that now lay trampled beneath the might of desperation. The enemy surged forward, a wave of bodies cloaked in shadows. They were faceless, nameless, monsters born not from the abyss, but from the hearts of men like us. My throat tightened as I caught a glimpse of their armor, rusted and battered, yet strangely alluring. It was not polished or perfect, it was a mask for the fear they wore deep inside. They, too, were terrified. The fear was the same, coursing through us like venom, binding us in a twisted fraternity of misery. And then there was Elira, a fierce warrior with a spirit like wildfire. She fought not for glory but for those lost dreams, the laughter of children, the warmth of a hearth long turned cold. Every clash of her blade was a requiem for the innocent, each parry a defiance against fate. I watched her, mesmerized and terrified, as she danced with death, a macabre ballet that left an ache in my chest. "They will know our names," she cried, a battle cry infused with sorrow, but I wondered if names mattered in the end. Were we not all just fleeting shadows, destined to fade away? The ground quaked beneath us, the sky a bruised canvas of purples and blacks as if the cosmos itself mourned. I felt a tremor of panic, a violent shudder that threatened to splinter my resolve. "Armor is a lie," I whispered to myself, the words tumbling from my lips like a haunting refrain. "It keeps us safe, yet it binds us." The helmet pressed against my skull, a constant reminder of my isolation. I could hear nothing but the thudding of my heart, the echo of my own fear. With each strike against flesh, the weight of what we were doing sank deeper into my bones. Was this honor? Was it valor? Or merely a masquerade of bravery, one that hid the truth beneath layers of cold metal? I saw flashes of humanity in the eyes of the enemy, a flicker of fear, a gasp of regret, as their lives were snuffed out like candles. Henry! Ilara! I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the tumult. They were lost in the melee, their silhouettes flickering like ghosts. I felt a strange exhilaration mixed with despair. What if they fell? What if I was the last standing in this sea of torment? A frigid chill gripped my heart, and I fought harder, desperately trying to carve my path through the chaos, each stroke a scream against the silence that loomed. In the thick of the battle, I caught a glimpse of the tattered flag fluttering in the wind, a beacon of hope that seemed to mock our struggle. It was stained with the blood of the fallen, a testament to dreams crushed under the weight of ambition. For glory, someone roared, but it rang hollow, an empty echo against the cries of anguish that surrounded us. And then, amidst the chaos, time slowed. I saw Ilara, her eyes wide, her breath coming in gasps as she faced a figure cloaked in darkness. The clash of swords resonated through my very soul, and I was paralyzed. She was fighting not just for her life but for every moment, the laughter, the whispered dreams, the warmth of the sun on her skin. The desperation in her movements was palpable, each strike laced with the raw, unfiltered fear of losing everything. Time warped, stretching like a taut string pulled too far, and I felt the universe in that moment, vast and indifferent. How small we were beneath the celestial expanse, how insignificant our struggles felt under the weight of the cosmos. My heart raced, echoing the primal rhythm of survival as I rushed toward her, toward the danger, toward the abyss. "Hold on! I'm coming!" I cried, but my voice barely made it past the cacophony. I was armored in fear, each piece of metal a reminder of the terror that gripped my heart. I remembered my mother's stories of knights, their shining armor a symbol of protection, but who were we kidding? We were all just scared children playing dress-up in a world that had forgotten how to be gentle. A scream shattered the air, and I felt it pierce my chest. It was Henry, his laughter silenced in an instant, his spirit extinguished. A rage ignited within me, a darkness that surged like a storm. I fought through the haze, my sword raised, fueled by grief and fury. Everything narrowed down to that moment, the world exploding in a kaleidoscope of fear and chaos. Ilara stumbled, her eyes locking onto mine, and in that heartbeat, I saw all our fears reflected back at me, the heartache, the loss, the weight of our choices. The shadows loomed, cold and unyielding, whispering promises of oblivion. But there was a flicker of defiance, a spark of rebellion against the encroaching darkness. We were not just armor-clad warriors lost in battle, we were the echoes of every life lived, every love cherished, every dream fought for and lost. As the tide of violence swelled around us, the clang of steel and the cries of the dying echoed in my ears. We were not just fighting for our lives, we were fighting for memories, for the chance to rise from the ashes of despair. The battle was not merely against flesh and blood, but against the very essence of our fears, each clash of metal a defiance of the shadows that threatened to consume us whole. I lunged forward, a warrior armored in fear but fueled by something deeper, something more profound. I was not just battling the soldiers before me, I was battling the shackles of my own heart. And in that moment, with every heartbeat, I knew, if fear was not the enemy, it was the raw truth that bound us together, the pain that forged us into something greater than ourselves. And as I charged into the fray, I felt the weight of history pressing against my chest, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we are all just fragments of a greater story, woven together by the threads of fear, hope, and an unwavering desire to survive. The battle continued, and with it, the echoes of our struggles would resonate through time, each heartbeat a reminder that in the end, we are all just searching for a way to wear our armor, both the metal of our making and the fears that shape us. A thunderous clash reverberated through the air, metal scraping against metal, as the battlefield turned into a twisted dance of desperation and valor. I stood amidst the disarray, breathless, heart pounding like a war drum echoing the chaos. The ground was slick with the remnants of shattered dreams and the cries of men. I could see him, Richard, my brother, a fleeting shadow now, clad in a glimmering suit of chainmail, shimmering like a beacon of hope against the turbulent sky. Yet the armor he wore, an intricate mesh of iron rings that had once promised protection, now felt more like a shackle. It weighed him down, held him back. "Run!" I wanted to scream, but the words caught in my throat, choked by the raw, choking fear that gripped me. I remember the stories of knights, those gallant figures who strode into battle like gods. Their armor glistened in the sunlight, each plate carefully crafted, a testament to human ingenuity. But here, in the thick of the fray, all that shimmered was the blood-soaked ground, and I saw Richard falter. He stumbled, encumbered by his own protection, its weight an unyielding reminder of his mortality. The armor had evolved, they said, over the decades and centuries, starting with leather cuirasses, simple and hastily thrown together, and then the advent of chainmail, a miraculous invention that danced fluidly with the body, protecting against slashes while leaving room for movement. But what good was it, I thought in that moment, when it became a tomb more than a shield? Richard's face turned toward me, a mixture of determination and despair etched into every line. "I can't feel my legs," he gasped, the words as much a confession as a curse. And then there was Eleanor, the woman I had admired from afar, her fierce spirit a balm against the brutal reality of our world. She was a warrior, wielding a sword that sang a song of vengeance, her armor a patchwork of leather and iron that barely concealed the scars of battles fought. Eleanor had fought beside us, her heart a raging fire, yet I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes now. What had the armor become but a relic of regret? As she swung her blade, a glimmer of light caught the edge, illuminating her face, hardened yet hopeful. "For every layer we add, we lose a piece of ourselves," she shouted, her voice barely rising above the clamor. I could taste the metallic tang of blood in the air, a bitter reminder that for every advancement in protection, there was a price. The full-plate armor, so grand and shiny, glimmered like a promise, but it held its own curses. Each plate was meticulously crafted, designed to deflect blows, yet in its gleaming glory, it had become a prison. The weight of steel and the burden of expectation pressed down on us all. The sun dipped lower, shadows creeping like memories. I remember the legends, how knights in shining armor rode into the sunset, victorious and unscathed. But why then did I feel so hollow? Why did Richard's struggles resonate with my own insecurities? The battlefield turned into a grotesque theater where the actors wore their armor like masks, hiding their fears beneath layers of cold steel. I watched as Richard clutched at his chest, gasping for breath, the cold metal biting into his flesh. His dreams of glory, once radiant, now turned to ash, scattered like fallen leaves. What was the point? I whispered to myself, but the question hung heavy in the air, echoing against the clashing swords and dying screams. Eleanor fought ferociously, her blows slicing through the chaos, yet I could see the fatigue etched on her brow. "I remember the first time I put on armor," she said, her voice a ghostly whisper. "It felt invincible, like I could conquer worlds. But the weight of too many battles had stripped her of that naivete, revealing a woman who understood the cost of survival. She moved with a grace that belied her burdens, but I could feel her fear, her heart racing alongside mine, a rhythm of uncertainty. The siege intensified, arrows raining down like harbingers of fate, and I ducked behind the remnants of a crumbling wall. Richard's figure, once so proud, now seemed like a wounded beast, struggling against the inevitable. "I'm not ready to die," he gasped, his voice cracking like the very armor he so desperately clung to. "Neither are we," I shouted, but the words felt hollow, swallowed by the cacophony of chaos. Time twisted and turned, the clock of fate ticking down with each heartbeat. The world around us blurred into shades of grey, the colors of life draining into despair. But amidst the darkness, I saw flickers of resolve, Eleanor's relentless spirit, Richard's indomitable heart. They fought against the odds, against the armor that weighed them down, against a world that demanded more than they could give. The battle raged, and I felt the walls of my own sanctuary begin to crumble. I was trapped in a moment where humanity clashed with the coldness of metal, where dreams and nightmares entwined in a macabre waltz. The armor we crafted to protect us, to make us stronger, had instead become a burden, a constant reminder of our fragility. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving us in the grip of night, I held on to that fleeting hope, the hope that transcended the battlefield, the armor, the blood. The fight was not just for survival, it was for our very souls, clawing against the weight of the world. Time felt infinite and fleeting all at once, each heartbeat a reminder that we were still here, still fighting, still yearning for something more than mere existence. I remembered the dreams of glory, the fantasies fueled by chivalric tales, but in that moment, I realized that honor was not found in the weight of armor but in the courage to stand against the tide. And just as I caught my breath, just as I thought we might find a way through, I saw Richard rise, the steel glinting ominously in the fading light. The battle was far from over, and while the shadows loomed large, I felt the spark of something unquenchable ignite within me, a desire to break free from the chains of tradition, to forge new paths in the chaos that surrounded us. The clamor of steel and the cries of the fallen faded, replaced by the haunting echo of our collective resolve. The night stretched endlessly before us, a canvas waiting to be painted with the blood of our determination. I remember every moment, every heartbeat, every breath, as we stood together in this tempest, ready to confront the darkness ahead. And so, we faced the unknown, the weight of our armor a reminder of our human condition, both vulnerable and resilient, lost yet always searching. The battle had just begun, the stakes higher than ever, and the only certainty was that the dawn would rise once more, casting its unforgiving light on our scars. The air was thick with the smell of iron and smoke, an acrid reminder that the battlefield was a lover with sharp, twisted limbs, and an insatiable appetite for chaos. I stood amidst the cries of men and the clashing of swords, a cacophony that shattered the stillness that had once wrapped around our village like a gentle embrace. Heart racing, I could feel the pulse of fear in my throat. It was a living thing, a beast clawing to escape. "Daniel, stay close!" My sister's voice rang out, sharp and desperate, cutting through the chaos like a silver dagger. Elara always had a way of holding me steady. In the wild heart of this hellish storm, she was my anchor, yet now, I could only watch as she fought, her blade a blur of silver against the dark, a dancer in a devil's waltz. I remember the hours leading up to this moment, where the sun hung low, casting long shadows over our lives, shadows that now seemed alive, creeping and twisting around us. The villagers had gathered, their faces taut with fear and resilience, but I'd been lost in thought, the weight of impending doom pressing down like a vice on my chest. What use were strategies of war when the enemy was not just a faceless horde but the very darkness that whispered to our souls? "Fight, Daniel!" Elara's voice, fierce and unyielding, echoed in my mind as I gripped my sword, its hilt slick with sweat. I wanted to fight, to be a part of this clash, a symphony of chaos, but terror bound my limbs like chains. I was terrified of the blood that would splatter like paint on our fields, the earth drinking deep from the wounds of our kin. But the enemy was here, and they had come not for mere conquest but to carve their legacy upon our bones. They were shadows, grotesque figures that twisted into grotesque shapes, each a reminder that survival was the cruelest game of all. I could see their eyes glinting with malice, hear their laughter, a sound that twisted like a knife in my gut. "Elara!" A cry broke from my lips, choked with the fear of loss, but the chaos swallowed it whole. Her eyes met mine, a moment of electric connection, fear mirrored in her gaze, fierce determination battling against the tide of violence surrounding us. With every thrust of her sword, she fought not just for survival but for our dreams, for a future that felt more and more like a distant memory. In the midst of it all stood Marcus, our leader, our fierce protector. He was a storm incarnate, a man who wore his scars like badges, each one a story, a testament to battles fought and lost. I could see him cutting through the enemy like a scythe through wheat, a relentless force, but even he had moments where the weight of grief and loss threatened to crush him. I could see it in the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes flickered with doubt when he thought no one was looking. "Remember the tactics," he shouted, voice booming above the din, rallying us like a shepherd calling his flock back from the brink of despair. "Don't let them divide us. Together, we are impenetrable." But in the heart of the fray, division was a whisper away, a breath of hesitation away. We were merely humans, raw and bleeding, caught in a dance of death that had no rhythm, no harmony. I remember the warmth of the sun on my back just before the first strike, before the world erupted into a frenzy of violence. It was a cruel joke, that warmth, a reminder of a life that now felt like a dream. I felt it slipping away as I swung my blade, clumsily at first, the weight of it unfamiliar, its bite shocking against my skin. "Focus, Daniel!" Elara's voice cut through the fog of panic. "You can do this." Her faith in me was a buoy in dark waters. I took a shaky breath, gripping the hilt tighter, feeling the pulse of the fight thrum beneath my skin. The strategy was simple, almost laughably naive: protect our home, our people. Yet, in the heat of battle, simplicity morphed into confusion, the lines between friend and foe blurring into a grotesque tapestry of blood and sweat. Each clash of steel felt like a heartbeat, a countdown to an inevitable end. But there were moments, amidst the chaos, where time stretched and curled like smoke. I caught a glimpse of Marcus, his silhouette framed against the firelight, a spectre wreathed in shadows, fighting for us all. He was a man who had faced his own demons, a man who had buried his own dreams under layers of blood-soaked earth. "We fight for tomorrow," he shouted, and I believed him, if only for a moment. Then came the sound, the sickening crunch of bone, the gurgle of a dying breath. A man fell near me, his eyes wide, disbelief etched into his features. I froze, the horror grappling for dominance, but Ilara was there, pulling me back. "We can't stop. We can't give in." And just like that, the spell was broken. I remember the way the moon hung heavy that night, an ominous watcher in the sky, bearing witness to the dance of death below. It was a cosmic joke. Here we were, mere mortals waging war, while the universe pulsed with indifference. Fate, I realized, had a cruel sense of humor. In our fight for life, we were nothing more than puppets on strings pulled by unseen hands. Yet the fire in my chest, the yearning to protect Ilara, Marcus, those I loved, wrapped around my soul like chains, anchoring me even as despair clawed at my heart. And there it was, the clash of tactics and strategies, the heart-wrenching beauty of raw, desperate humanity in the face of annihilation. Each scream, each cry, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we found a flicker of light, a humanity that refused to be extinguished. As the night raged on, the world around me morphed into a haunting memory, one I couldn't shake, each heartbeat a promise, each breath a prayer. I knew, deep down, this battle was not just for survival, it was for the dreams we held as tightly as our swords. And even as the dark threatened to consume us, we fought on, broken, scarred, but undeniably alive. In that moment, amidst the chaos of war, the truth hung heavy in the air. We were warriors of a world gone mad, yet still, we danced, to the rhythm of survival, to the tune of hope, our hearts echoing in the silence that lay ahead. The air hangs thick with the scent of blood and fear. It grips the throat, suffocating and raw, as the distant clang of steel on steel reverberates like a grim heartbeat through the valley. Shadows dance under the looming clouds, a tempest of dark whispers swirling in the wind, and I can't shake the feeling that the heavens themselves are about to weep. I remember the moment I stood on that muddy hill, mud and blood mingling beneath my feet, the squelching sound echoing in my mind like a cruel joke of fate. There's a tension in the air, a taut string, ready to snap. I see Sir Alaric, his armor battered, a relic of glories past, but his spirit, oh, how it flickers. He clenches his sword, knuckles white, and I wonder if he feels the weight of history pressing upon him. His eyes, usually so fierce, now reflect a haunting uncertainty. He's haunted by his own decisions, a warrior who once believed in the righteousness of his cause, now questioning every single moment that brought him here. Did he choose this path, or was it chosen for him? Beside him stands Lady Eloan, her heart wrapped in layers of resolve and despair. Her presence is fierce, yet fragile, like the split second between life and death when a blade glints under the sun. She remembers the laughter of those lost in battles fought for a king who lies feasting while they bleed. She grips her bow, fingers trembling, as though the very weapon might betray her, just as her own memories do. She yearns to protect her people, but in her heart, there lies a gnawing ache. Each arrow she sends forth carries with it a piece of her soul, a sacrifice she never intended to make. Hold the line! Alaric bellows, his voice a war cry that cuts through the chaos. The command ripples through the ranks, a tangible force. They are a tapestry of men and women dressed in armor gleaming dully under an angry sky, each heartbeat echoing the fear of the unknown. The soldiers align in a shield wall, a dense thicket of iron and flesh, ready to absorb the impact of the advancing enemy. I remember my own heart racing, the anticipation of battle, the wild surge of adrenaline rushing through my veins. 50 paces! Alaric commands, and in that moment, the world narrows to the width of a sword blade. The enemy, a dark cloud of warriors, surges forward, faces obscured beneath helm and shadow. The clash of shields and swords erupts, a cacophony echoing against the grim backdrop of desperation. I remember the way time stretched, warped by the weight of fear. Each moment felt like an eternity, as the realization washed over me. This was no longer a mere battle, it was a ballet of life and death, choreographed by fate. Alaric's sword swings wide, slicing through the air like a comet streaking across a night sky, and I catch his eye. In that instant, I see the ghost of doubt dance behind his steely facade. Eloan raises her bow, every breath a prayer. She releases the arrow, and time slows. It flies, a heartbeat suspended in the chaos, seeking its mark. The world narrows, her vision sharpens to a singular focus, a moment of clarity in the storm. She watches as it pierces flesh, and yet, in the joy of her aim, there lies an echo of horror. Each enemy falls, but with them, a piece of her humanity crumbles too. Flank left. Alaric roars, eyes wide, a storm brewing within. But the command feels different this time, drenched in desperation. The soldiers scatter, and I see them, young boys, faces unmarked by age, grappling with the terror of their first taste of blood. The formation begins to unravel like a tapestry pulled too tightly, threads snapping one by one. The fear is palpable, a living, breathing entity. Hold your ground. Alaric's voice cracks, shadows creeping into his gaze. For your homes, your families. His battle cry is powerful, but it's interlaced with the screams of ghosts, the echoes of those who fought and fell before him, whispers of their failure hanging in the air like the scent of smoke after a fire. But Eloan, her heart racing, her resolve wavering, sees a flicker of hope. She catches sight of an opening, a small but growing crack in the enemy lines, and for a fleeting moment, she envisions glory, a way to turn the tide. Her heart pounds, a wild drum echoing in her ears, and yet, with every step forward, she feels the weight of every life lost, every friendship shattered. Alaric, she shouts, desperation spilling from her lips. The left flank! We can strike! The world swirls around them, a tempest of chaos and conflict, and, for a heartbeat, Alaric hesitates. The weight of leadership presses down, the knowledge that one wrong decision could cost them everything. He sees her fierce determination, and within that fiery spirit, he finds a flicker of the man he once was, a man unafraid to charge into the unknown. But then, the enemy surges, a wave of darkness threatening to swallow them whole. I remember the shift, the earth trembling beneath the weight of fate. Alaric's command cuts through the air, a lifeline, formed the wedge. They regroup, their bodies aligning in a fearsome, pointed formation, a desperate counter to the threat. Each soldier knows what lies ahead, the spectre of death looming large. Yet, they stand. They hold. They are the last bastion of hope in a world stained with betrayal. Silence crashes like thunder as they charge, a primal roar echoing from their throats, hearts pounding in unison. They plunge into the fray, bodies colliding, and in that moment, time ceases to exist. The battle rages on, fierce and unrelenting, and the sky above darkens, as if the cosmos itself mourns their struggle. This is not just a fight for survival. It is a dance with destiny, a whirlwind of emotions, fear, courage, love, and loss, all woven together in the fabric of war. I see Alaric's resolve harden, Eloan's heart break and mend, and I realize that in this moment, there are no true victories or losses, only the raw, unfiltered essence of humanity, forever etched into the annals of time. And as the battle rages on, as the clash of steel sings its haunting melody, I understand that this cycle will never end. Each battle a reflection of the last, each moment a whisper of what came before, and what lies ahead. The canvas of history is painted with shades of glory and despair, and every heartbeat echoes through its endless expanse, leaving a mark, a reminder that we are all part of this ever-turning wheel, caught in the dance of existence. The air is thick with tension, a palpable weight settling over the battlements. The sun hangs low, burnt orange and blood red, casting long shadows that stretch like ghostly fingers across the cobbled streets. I stand there, heart pounding, the weight of history pressing down, urging me to remember, to feel every single heartbeat reverberate through these ancient stones. It's not just the siege, it's the echoes of 1,000 souls who have fought and fallen right where I stand. I remember the cries, the whispers, the wailing that pierced the night like arrows through flesh. I remember In the distance, the drums of war begin their relentless beat, a tribal rhythm that calls to something primordial deep within us. It stirs the blood, ignites the primal fight-or-flight instinct. Beside me, Ilara grips her sword, knuckles white, her gaze flicking toward the horizon where the enemy approaches like a storm. She's fierce, unyielding, a tempest contained within a fragile frame. But beneath that fierce exterior, I see fear flash across her face. I've seen it before, in the quiet moments before the battle when the bravado fades, and all that's left is raw vulnerability. The truth is, we are all just children pretending to be warriors, and the walls that protect us are made of dreams and dread. I can't believe this is happening, she mutters, her voice barely above a whisper, cracking like the earth beneath us. I want to reach for her, to offer comfort, but in this moment, the walls feel like they're closing in. I remember the last time we stood on these battlements, laughing off the darkness that loomed just outside. How naive we were. The ghosts of our laughter are now mere echoes, taunting us. To my left, Roderick paces, the burden of his thoughts etched into his brow. The commander of the garrison, he feels the weight of every life here, every soul he's sworn to protect. Yet, I see the uncertainty in his eyes, a flicker of doubt that he cannot shake. We're outnumbered, he mutters, a storm of emotions brewing just beneath the surface. This isn't a battle we can win. But he's fought too long to surrender, too deeply woven into the fabric of this place. I can see it in the way he tightens his grip around the hilt of his sword, as if it's the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. From beyond the walls, the enemy's war cries rise like a cacophony of death, a hymn of destruction that makes the ground tremble. I can almost taste the smoke and grime of battle in the air. They will break against our walls, Roderick insists, his voice rising in a desperate rallying cry, but I cannot help but wonder, what good are walls when the heart is already broken? I remember my father's words, spoken to me in a time that feels like another life. Fortifications are no more than a fancy cage, he said, and the heart knows no prison. How right he was. Yet, here we are, trapped within these stone confines, battling not only the enemy, but our own fears, our own ghosts. Focus! Ilara snaps, her voice slicing through my reverie, her eyes fierce, bright with determination, even as the tremor in her hands betrays her. The enemy is nearly upon us now. I can see the glint of swords, the flash of armor, and in that moment, dread washes over me, thick and suffocating. It grips my throat, choking the breath from my lungs. Do you remember the stories? I whisper, trying to anchor us in something, anything, other than this impending darkness. The tales we used to laugh at. I remember how we used to dream of valor and glory, how we thought ourselves invincible. We were young, foolish, and the laughter felt eternal, a sweet nectar that dulled the edges of reality. Now, the laughter is a distant memory, a haunting refrain. Ilara's breath hitches, a flicker of recognition sparking in her eyes. The knight who faced the dragon, she murmurs, but there's no joy in her tone, only the bitter taste of irony. He didn't just battle the beast, he battled his fear, his own darkness. He lost more than he won. In that fractured moment, we share a breath, a connection forged in the furnace of fear. And then it snaps as the gates begin to rattle, the sounds of war crashing over us like a tidal wave. The enemy is upon us, and the walls we've relied on for protection feel less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb. Roderick! Ilara shouts, urgency twisting her voice into something unrecognizable. We need to prepare. The moment hangs there, suspended in time, fragile as glass, before shattering into chaos. The gates burst open with a thunderous roar, and all at once, the world becomes a whirlwind of chaos and clashing steel, of screams and shouts echoing off the stones. I'm swept away in the tide, there's no more room for thought, only instinct. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and fear, a heady concoction that sends shivers down my spine. I remember the feel of my sword, the weight of it in my hands, the cool metal a stark contrast to the heat building around us. I fight alongside Ilara and Roderick, the three of us a ragged line against the onslaught, but the tide is relentless. Each swing, each thrust, feels like a desperate plea for survival, a testament to our resolve, a futile battle against fate. But the true battle rages within, where the stakes are higher than life and death. I catch Roderick's eye in a brief moment of clarity, and in that gaze, I see the labyrinth of doubt, fear, and the fierce determination to protect those he loves. I remember, once more, the stories we shared, the laughter that seemed to echo in a time far removed from this horror. Together, he shouts, rallying us against the tide of encroaching darkness, and it strikes me, this is not just a fight against walls of stone, but against the walls we've built within ourselves. The fears, the doubts, the burdens of a past we cannot escape. As the enemy crashes against our defenses, I feel the weight of every heartbeat, every breath, a symphony of desperation that binds us in this moment. We are not alone. Each clash of metal resonates not just with the fight for survival, but for the very essence of who we are. The walls tremble, but so do we. And in that trembling, we find strength. The battle rages on, a cacophony of chaos woven with threads of resilience, but no resolution, no end. Only the fight continues, a haunting echo of the past swirling into the unknown, leaving us standing at the precipice, prepared to fight, to endure, to remember. The sun was a blood-orange disk hanging low on the horizon, casting long shadows that reached like skeletal fingers over the cracked cobblestones of the castle courtyard. Clamor echoed through the air, a symphony of chaos, the frantic clang of metal against metal, the sharp cries of men and the low, ominous growl of distant cannons. I stood there, heart pounding like a drum in a funeral march, gripping the cold stone of the battlements, the weight of my father's legacy pressing down on me, a suffocating mantle of expectation. Hold the walls! The shout pierced the air, a desperate plea that sent chills racing up my spine. I turned toward the voice, finding Edward, my twin brother, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, eyes wild with a mix of terror and fierce determination. We had grown up under the banner of this fortress, its stone steeped in our family's blood and glory. And now, it was crumbling around us, the very foundation of our lives teetering on the brink of annihilation. I remember the stories of our ancestors, knights and lords who'd once stood here, invincible. But the romanticized tales drifted away like smoke in the wind, leaving only the raw reality of our situation. The enemy was at the gate, a tide of raucous men hungry for conquest, their shouts mingling with the anguished wails of the besieged. They were not just here to conquer land, they were here to erase us. To erase everything we had ever known. Focus, Ariadne, Edward's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. They'll come for us next. I shook my head, the chaos around me a gnawing beast, threatening to swallow me whole. I was not a warrior, I was a historian, a dreamer. I wanted to pen epic tales, not live in one where the ink was blood. The castle loomed above us, a monstrous silhouette against the dying light, its towers scarred and pockmarked, like an aging soldier in the twilight of battle. Each stone seemed to whisper the stories of those who had stood against the tide of time, their spirits entwined with the very walls that defied the storm. They were ghosts, haunting me, begging for remembrance, yet here I was, trapped in the present, a mere spectre of those who had come before. A sudden crash echoed through the battlements, a cacophony that sent a jolt through my heart. They've breached the outer wall. The cry rang out, a death knell, and in that moment, time hung heavy, a tangible weight pressing against my chest. I could taste the fear, sharp and metallic, mingling with the smoke that curled around me. Get everyone to the keep! Edward barked, his authority solid, yet tinged with the panic he worked hard to suppress. I watched him, my twin, my anchor amidst the storm, his courage a flickering flame in the suffocating dark. But this wasn't just a battle of swords and shields, it was a battle of wills. And my will was faltering. I remember the dreams I had before this chaos, dreams of quiet libraries and the smell of aged parchment. I had thought the castles were mere relics, historical curiosities to be analyzed and admired from afar. But now, they were living, breathing entities, pulsating with life and death, with every heartbeat a reminder of what was at stake. The air grew thick as the siege continued, a relentless wave crashing against our resolve. I felt the pulse of my heart sinking with the rhythmic battering of the enemy's war machines. We'll hold them, I whispered, though doubt gnawed at me, a relentless rodent burrowing through my resolve. In the shadows of the keep, I found Cassandra, a healer, her hand stained with the remnants of her life's work. The sight of her, her lips pursed in concentration, her brow furrowed in worry, stirred something deep within me. She was the embodiment of hope, even when the world around us was crumbling. "We're going to die here," she said, the tremor in her voice betraying her brave facade. I reached out, grasping her hand, and in that fleeting moment, we were not soldiers or nobility, we were simply terrified souls grasping at the threads of life. "I remember laughter," I said, the absurdity of the memory cutting through the tension. "Can you believe we used to sneak out to the river and catch frogs?" Cassandra's eyes widened with surprise and a spark of joy flickered across her face. "And you were always terrified of the mud," she retorted, a half-smile breaking through the darkness. Suddenly, the walls trembled beneath us, a cacophony of splintering wood and the chilling sound of metal hitting stone. "They're coming!" Edward's bellow was drowned in the chaos. I felt something snap inside me, an ember igniting into a flame of desperation. "We have to fight!" I cried, my voice raw, and I threw myself into motion, purpose igniting my fear. The gates shuddered, the enemy surged forward, a tide of faces twisted in rage, their shouts a primal roar that threatened to drown out all reason. I gripped a sword, the weight unfamiliar yet somehow grounding. I stood shoulder to shoulder with Edward, my pulse racing, every breath heavy with the promise of bloodshed. The moment stretched, a visceral eternity where fear and courage danced dangerously close. I remember Edward's gaze locking onto mine, and in that lightning-fast connection, I felt an unbreakable bond, a promise that we would not fall alone. But in this world of brick and shadow, what did that promise even mean? The ghosts of the past loomed larger than life, their whispers echoing, reminding me that legacies are forged in fire and ash. The gates splintered, a gaping maw tearing open, and the night swallowed the last remnants of our sanity. As the enemy flooded in, their shadows cast over us like a harvest moon, something primal awakened within me. The battle was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a fight for memory, for the echoes of laughter and dreams that had once filled these halls. And as the tide of chaos crashed against the fortress walls, I took my stand. Not just for Edward, not just for Cassandra, but for every soul that had ever called this castle home. For every story that deserved to be told, for every heartbeat that echoed a past we were desperate to hold onto. The siege was a storm, a tempest that would either wash away our legacy or carve it deeper into the stones of history, and in that moment, I was ready to fight for it all. The air crackled with tension, thick as the smoke that curled from the dying embers in the distance, a ghostly haze wrapping around the soldiers like a shroud. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, the earth trembling beneath my feet. The stench of sweat and blood mingled with the acrid smoke, each breath a reminder of the chaos swirling around us. I could see him, Jacob, just a few yards away, his face a mask of fear and determination, eyes wide under the weight of the night. He was just a common soldier, a boy really, barely old enough to grow the stubble on his chin. And yet, here we were, plunged into a hell where innocence was stripped away like autumn leaves caught in a storm. The battle raged on, the clash of steel ringing out like a funeral dirge, drowning out the cries and screams that echoed through the darkness. I remember the first time I saw Jacob, how he laughed with the other recruits, his voice light, unburdened. But now, that laughter hung like a ghost in the air, a haunting reminder of what we had lost. The boy who once danced through life was now a soldier, caught in the nightmare of survival, and I could see the flicker of doubt creeping into his eyes. "Are we going to die?" he asked, his voice trembling, and I knew he needed reassurance. I wanted to tell him that we would make it, that we would tell stories of courage and glory one day, but the truth felt too heavy, like a stone in my gut. What did I know of glory? I was just a man trying to survive, just a common soldier like him. The ground shook again, and I saw another soldier fall, a flash of red in the shadows, lost to the chaos. My heart sank like a stone. I remembered, vividly, the faces of those I had fought alongside. Each one had a story, a mother waiting back home, a girl with laughter like sunshine, dreams of a future that would never come. I could feel their ghosts wrapped around me, pushing me forward even as my legs screamed for me to stop. "Keep moving, Jacob! Keep moving!" I shouted, my voice raw and hoarse, but the words felt hollow. The weight of my own fear pressed against my chest, a relentless tide that threatened to pull me under. I fought against it with every ounce of strength, but the truth clawed at me, we were nothing but pieces on a chessboard, pawns in a game played by those far above us. I looked to my left, and there was Thomas, his jaw set, eyes fierce with a resolve that belied the quaking of his hands. Thomas was the eldest of us, a man with a past marked by loss. He had lost his family to famine, to the cruel hand of fate that often turned its back on the innocent. I had watched him transform from a man of sorrow into a beacon of strength, even if it was forged in fire. But now, as we crouched behind a crumbling wall, I could see the flicker of doubt in his gaze too. The night was alive with shadows, and in those shadows, I saw the flickering lights of memories, laughter around a campfire, the taste of bread shared among friends, the warmth of a hand clasped in solidarity. But those memories were slipping away, replaced by the harsh reality that surrounded us. I remember the way the moon hung low that night, an eerie sentinel watching over us, an indifferent witness to our suffering. "Do you think they even care?" Thomas whispered, his voice barely above the din. "Do you think those up there," he gestured toward the distant castle, a monument to power and privilege, "know what we're going through? Do they hear us?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I felt the truth settle like a heavy cloak over my shoulders, suffocating in its weight. The leaders, the generals, they fought battles in rooms far from the blood and mud. We were the ones who bled, who cried, who faced the enemy with nothing but our resolve and the echoes of our dreams. And then, as if summoned by our despair, the enemy surged forward, shadows becoming solid, faces twisted in rage and desperation. I felt the adrenaline course through me, a primal surge that urged me to fight, to hold on to the thread of life. The world narrowed to the sounds of clashing metal and the screams of the wounded. Each moment stretched into eternity. "Jacob!" I called, but my voice was swallowed by the chaos. I could see him, facing the onslaught with a mix of terror and bravery, the pulse of youth battling the weight of fear. I would not let him go. I would not let this night claim him. In that moment, I surged forward, pushing past the dread, my body moving on instinct. I remember the clash, the impact, the surge of violence rushing through me. A man fell, and I felt the heat of his blood splash against my skin, a stark reminder of my own mortality. The cries around me faded into white noise as I fought, driven by something deeper than survival, by the bonds we had forged in the fire of shared suffering. I saw Jacob again, his face a mask of fear, but also of defiance. He was fighting for his life, for the lives of those who stood beside him. And in that moment, despite the chaos, despite the swirling darkness, I felt the weight of our collective struggle, an unbreakable bond that tethered us together in this madness. Thomas took a step forward, his voice rising above the din as he rallied us, a beacon of hope shining through the murk. "We fight for each other. We fight for the ones we love. Remember who we are." My heart surged. I remembered our shared dreams, the laughter, the campfires, the moments that had forged our camaraderie out of the crucible of despair. Each strike of metal was a symphony of desperation and hope, and I knew, in that instant, that we were more than soldiers. We were brothers, bound by the weight of our shared humanity. And as the battle raged on, I realized that the role of the common soldier was not just to fight, it was to hold on, to forge connections, to remember in the darkest of nights that we were not alone. In the chaos, in the fleeting moments of clarity, we were alive, breathing, and fighting for something greater than ourselves. The battle was far from over, the night felt endless, but as I stood shoulder to shoulder with Jacob and Thomas, I felt an unyielding resolve. The echoes of our struggle would not fade, they would carve their place in the annals of history, a testament to the power of the common soldier, facing the abyss, fighting against the dark, hearts beating as one in the desolate night. The stench of blood and iron hangs thick in the air, clinging to the throat like a bitter memory refusing to fade. Around me, the battlefield is a twisted tableau of chaos, shadows dance in the flickering light of distant flames, and the ground, the very earth, shudders beneath the weight of despair. I can't tell if it's the tremors of the land or the thundering of my own heart, pushing against my ribcage, desperate to burst free from this hell. I remember a sky that once shone blue, laughter that echoed like a song, but that seems to belong to someone else, someone who never stood here, in this nightmare. There he is, Thomas, a boy shoved into a man's boots and thrust into the fray. His eyes wide, reflecting the firestorm raging around us, flicker with a mix of dread and fierce determination. He grips his sword tight, knuckles white against the hilt, but I can see the tremor in his hand. He's just a farmer from a village that smelled of hay and the sweet promise of spring. What does he know of this carnage? I want to tell him to run, to drop the sword and flee, but I know he can't. None of us can. Keep your head down, I shout, my voice barely breaking through the cacophony, the clash of steel, the cries of the wounded, the dying whispers of men who will never see their homes again. My heart is a drum, thrumming to the rhythm of war, but beneath it, an ache simmers. I remember the warmth of my mother's embrace, her hands calloused from years of toil, and how she would sing me to sleep, unaware of the shadows that would one day swallow me whole. Beside Thomas is Helga, a woman with a heart as fierce as the lion she bears on her breastplate. She stands tall, defiance etched into her features, her hair a wild halo amidst the oncoming storm. I can feel her fear, it wraps around us like a cloak, but she wears it as armor. I won't let them take our land, she shouts, her voice rising above the din, a battle cry that cuts through the darkness. She thinks of her home too, of the little sister waiting by the hearth, watching for a sister who promised to return. I see the flash of a memory in her eyes, the warmth of sunlight filtering through oak trees, the smell of fresh bread pulled from the oven. It's the same memory that haunts my dreams. The same one that reminds me of everything we're fighting for, even as our lives are reduced to mere moments. Hold the line, comes the order, a bark from somewhere behind me, and my legs move on instinct, though my mind is still reeling. We form a line, bodies pressed against one another, a makeshift wall against the tide of chaos. The enemy is a blur of shadows, faces obscured beneath the weight of steel and malice. They are ghosts, all of us trapped in this macabre dance, where death is the only true victor. I can feel the heat of the flames licking at my skin, feel the weight of the sword, a cold, hard truth. The rush of adrenaline surges through me, but it doesn't drown out the gnawing fear nestled in the pit of my stomach. I remember the stories they told us, how heroes are forged in battle, how glory awaits those who wield their swords with courage. But here, amidst the bloodshed, I see the truth. Glory is a cruel mistress, and she demands a price no one can afford. Watch out! Thomas screams as a figure lunges towards us, a blur of motion. Instinct takes hold, I swing my sword, the blade biting into flesh, the shock reverberating through my arm. It's a sickening sound, a wet gasp that steals my breath. The man falls, eyes wide in disbelief, and for a moment, the world stills. I see the fear, the desperation, the realization that he, too, was a boy once, dreaming of futures that will never come. My hands tremble, and I want to retch, but I can't. Helga fights beside me, her movements a symphony of precision and fury. I envy her, the way she dances through the chaos, a warrior born from the ashes of despair. Her laughter rings out, a haunting melody that stirs something deep within me. You're not scared, are you? She teases, and even in this hell, I see the spark of life in her eyes. Just calculating, I reply through gritted teeth, yet my heart races with fear and admiration. I don't feel like a warrior, I feel like a spectre, haunting the remnants of my own spirit. We press forward, a tide of humanity against the abyss, but I can't shake the feeling that we are merely pawns in a game far beyond our understanding. Time slips through our fingers like sand. Minutes stretch into lifetimes, and with every breath, I feel the weight of our choices. I remember the faces of friends lost to the madness, their laughter echoing in my mind. We are not noble, not brave, we are desperate, each swing of our swords desperate to carve out a place in a world that has forgotten us. Look out! Helga shouts again, and I turn just in time to see Thomas falter, a shadow looming over him. My heart plunges into my stomach as I rush forward, every muscle screaming. I push, I shove, but the blade finds its mark, a flash of steel that steals his breath away. No! I roar, a sound that rends the air, that shatters the facade of bravery we've worn like a second skin. I kneel beside him, cradling his head in my arms, feeling the warmth of life seep away like the fading sun. I remember his laughter, bright and innocent, and in this moment, all the weight of war crashes down upon me, the futility, the horror, the crushing loss. Helga stands frozen, anguish etched into her face. We are trapped in this moment, our lives hanging in a delicate balance between hope and despair. I want to scream at the heavens, to curse the gods who watch us with indifferent eyes. The battlefield is a graveyard, and we are the ghosts wandering among the ruins of our own humanity. The din of war blurs into a distant echo, the chaos fading into the background as I hold Thomas, this boy who dreamed a simple dream, a life away from the bloodshed. I remember the stars, the vastness of the night, their silent witness to our suffering. And in this moment, I learn an unthinkable truth: life is exquisite in its fragility, a fleeting flicker that can vanish in an instant. As the shadows deepen, I see the flicker of hope in Helga's eyes. We stand, battered but unbroken, as the tide of chaos surges around us. We are not heroes, we are warriors, flawed, desperate, grinding against the wheel of fate. And though the darkness consumes us, we will fight, because sometimes, in the grip of despair, it is all we have left. The thunder of hooves shattered the stillness of the dawn, a terrifying symphony that sent shivers down the spine of every man who stood on that blood-soaked field. A heavy mist hung low, wrapping itself around us like a death shroud, and I could barely see the faces of my brothers in arms. But I could hear their hearts pounding, our collective fear and anticipation thrumming in sync with the wild, untamed rhythm of the approaching cavalry. I remember the first time I saw a cavalry charge. It was a dream that felt too real, as if time herself had woven my fate into the tapestry of that moment, a blur of galloping horses, their muscles rippling beneath dark coats, snorting steam that mingled with the cold morning air. It was beautiful, yes, and terrifying too, like watching a storm roll in, a tempest of fury and power. But now I stood at the precipice of that fierce beauty, fear gripping my gut like a vice. To my right was Lysa, a fierce warrior with eyes like stormy seas. She was a lady who had traded silk gowns for leather armor, and though everyone called her the Maiden of Steel, I knew better. She was not made of metal, she was flesh and blood, raw and real. Her fingers twitched around the hilt of her sword, the blade reflecting the pale light of dawn, and I could feel her unease like an electric current crackling in the air. "What if they break through?" she whispered, voice taut with apprehension. I looked into her eyes, those swirling depths of courage and vulnerability, and I felt my own fears reflected back at me. "It doesn't matter," I replied, though my voice wavered. "We fight. We must." What I didn't say was that I could feel the weight of fate resting on my shoulders, a heavy cloak that seemed to suffocate me, pressing down harder with every passing moment. I could smell the earth, rich and loamy, but beneath that was the stench of sweat and fear, the acrid tang of metal that reminded us all, this was war. The cavalry, the shock troops of our time, surged toward us like a tidal wave. I could see their banners snapping in the wind, a mosaic of colors that held the promise of glory and the specter of death. They were gods on horseback, men transformed by fearlessness and fury, and I wondered if they felt the same surge of dread that twisted my insides into knots. Did they see us as mere ants beneath their hooves, or did they sense the weight of our defiance? I remember the distant scream of a horn, a clarion call that pierced through the fog of my thoughts. In that moment, everything slowed, even time held its breath. I spotted Roderick, my childhood friend, his face pale and drawn, the weight of the world on his boyish shoulders. He gripped his spear as if it were a lifeline. "I don't want to die here," he murmured, a flicker of panic lighting his eyes. His fear was palpable, a raw nerve exposed to the world, and it resonated with my own. "None of us do," I said, trying to infuse strength into my words. "But we will not fall easily. We are more than fodder. We are men and women with dreams, with lives to protect." I could almost see the ghosts of our aspirations swirling around us, echoing the laughter of children, the warmth of hearth fires, the taste of bread still warm from the oven. But dreams do not hold up against steel. The ground trembled as the cavalry drew closer, a wall of muscle and fury, and I felt the heartbeat of our world quicken. The earth was breathing, and we were about to become part of its dark rhythm. Lysa's gaze sharpened, a glint of fire igniting in her eyes. "Together," she said fiercely, and I nodded. We were all bound by something larger than ourselves, a raw, unyielding bond forged in the heat of battle. In that moment, I could feel the tide of history swaying, the weight of every battle fought before us, every life lost. The cavalry would charge, and our lives would dance on the edge of the blade. Then the moment shattered. The cavalry descended upon us, a fierce storm unleashed. The thunderous hooves roared like 1,000 wild beasts, and the air thickened with the cries of the dying and the clash of steel. I felt the ground quake beneath me as men fell, faces twisted in fear and agony, their dreams extinguished in an instant. I couldn't look away. I was rooted, a spectator in a horrific spectacle, watching as the world burned around me. But then, as Lysa rallied our troops, the tide shifted. I saw her sword rise and fall, a flash of silver against the chaos, and the flame of life ignited within me. We were not ants, we were warriors. I charged forward, adrenaline surging through my veins, my heart pounding like a war drum. I remember the taste of blood in the air, hot and metallic, mingling with the smoke. I remember the cries, a cacophony of despair and bravery, the sounds of men fighting for their lives, for their families, for a future that was slipping through their fingers like sand. I felt fear clawing at my throat, but it was drowned out by the growing roar of defiance. Around me, familiar faces morphed into twisted masks of determination and dread. Roderick fell, the light extinguished from his eyes, and I felt a piece of my soul shatter. But there was no time for grief. The cavalry was upon us, the shock troops of the Middle Ages, gripped by the fervor of battle and the promise of blood. I could see Lysa fighting fiercely, her back against mine, and despite the horror, I felt a flicker of hope. We were part of something monumental, a clash of wills and destinies, and within that chaos, we were alive. Holding onto each other, we surged forward, defiance radiating from our very beings, a tempest of flesh and steel that would not back down. I remember the heartsick chaos, the way time melted into the moment, a swirling vortex of struggle and survival. And in that eternal instant, I realized, this was our world, our war, and even amidst the carnage, I felt a strange sense of belonging. As the cavalry thundered ever closer, the echoes of our defiance rang out through the mist, a haunting refrain that promised there would be no end, not yet. The air is thick with the scent of iron and fear, the tension palpable as a storm brews on the horizon. I remember the sound first, a low rumble, like distant thunder, but no, it's not nature stirring. It's the beat of hooves, hundreds of them, pounding against the earth, a terrifying herald of chaos. I stand knee-deep in mud, heart hammering like a frantic drum, watching the line of cavalry crest the hill, glinting armor, fierce faces, banners snapping in the wind. This is not just a battle, it's the clash of titans, a cacophony of wills. Thomas, a young knight, his eyes wide with fear and determination, rides at the front. He's just a boy, really, barely out of his adolescence, yet here he is, thrust into a world where glory and death dance a macabre waltz. His hand trembles on the hilt of his sword, sweat trickling down his brow as he remembers his mother's face, the way she implored him not to go. He had promised her he would return, but promises wear thin like old leather under the weight of war. Beside him, Isabella watches from the fringes, a healer with scars of her own, scars that weave stories of loss and survival across her hands. She's seen men burn and bleed, heard their last whispers like the rustle of autumn leaves. She holds a bundle of herbs, their earthy scent a futile attempt to ward off the coming carnage. "We shouldn't be here," she whispers, but her voice is swallowed by the roar of the approaching cavalry. The nights are a storm, a force of nature that cannot be tamed. She feels the ground shake beneath her, the very fabric of reality threatening to unravel. The world tilts as the first clash erupts, a cacophony of metal against metal, the shrieks of men merging with the screams of horses. Thomas charges ahead, his heart racing faster than the thundering hooves beneath him. He crashes into the enemy lines, the sensation of cold steel biting into flesh, the warm spray of blood painting his armor crimson. Each swing of his sword is a prayer, a plea to the heavens that he might survive this dance of death. "I will not die here," he roars, but inside, he knows the truth, the battlefield is a fickle mistress, and all too often, she demands a steep price. The cavalry, the mounted knights, are terrifying and beautiful all at once, a deadly ballet. Their horses gallop like the wind, a blur of sinew and muscle, obeying their masters even as they sense the impending doom. It's a wild, primal dance, a showcase of raw power. I can see the knights' faces, stark under their visors, a whirlwind of rage and fear. They are both kings and pawns, masters of the field yet vulnerable to the whims of fate. Each charge, each strike, each moment on the battlefield weaves a tapestry of glory and tragedy. Isabella feels the chaos seep into her bones, the shouts and cries of the wounded calling to her like sirens. She rushes forward, her heart in her throat, desperately seeking those in need. A knight falls, his leg crushed beneath the weight of his horse, eyes wide with terror. She kneels beside him, fingers brushing against his trembling hand, offering comfort amidst the encroaching shadows of death. "Hold on, please," she pleads, but her voice is lost in the tumult. She knows, deep down, that some souls are too far gone, destined to join the earth, just like the countless bodies that will soon litter the battlefield. Thomas sees her, a flicker of light amidst the darkness, and his chest tightens. He wants to shout for her to retreat, to escape this hell, but he is trapped in the relentless tide of battle. The screams, the clangor, the wet thud of bodies crashing to the ground, each sound resonates within him, a haunting echo of mortality. He swings his sword again, driven by something primal, something that tells him he must protect her at all costs. And yet, the irony gnaws at him. He is meant to be her protector, yet here he is, a soldier lost in the frenzy of war. As the sun dips lower, the shadows stretch longer, the sky darkening with the promise of blood. The cavalry, once a proud wave of might, begins to falter. Horses stumble, knights fall, the ground slick with the remnants of valor. I can feel the weight of despair pressing down, a fog rolling in that suffocates hope. "I remember," Thomas mutters as he fights, "I remember my father's laughter, the way he taught me to ride." Each memory is a shard of glass, cutting through the chaos, reminding him of the life waiting beyond this cruel horizon. Isabella's heart races as she works to patch wounds, to save lives, but each moment feels like a tick of the clock, a reminder that time is slipping away. She wishes she could turn back, to find a past where nights were not but stories, where she was free to dream of love instead of this horror. "You're going to be okay," she whispers to a soldier, even as the light fades from his eyes. Her hands tremble, the weight of her failures crushing her spirit. "Why can't I save them?" she cries into the void, but the void gives no answer. The cavalry charges again, fierce and relentless, but the tide of war is shifting. I can feel it, a palpable force wrapping around us like a tightening noose. The realization settles heavy in my chest, victory is but an illusion, shimmering like a mirage. The knights, those once mighty warriors, are now lost in the chaos, mere pawns in this grotesque game of life and death. And as the battle rages on, I watch as Thomas and Isabella are swept into the maelstrom of fate, a heart-wrenching spiral of courage and despair. Their lives intertwine in this dark tapestry, woven with threads of hope and fear, glory and heartbreak. The hooves thunder like an unstoppable tide, drowning out the cries of the fallen, but I know this isn't the end. No, it's merely the beginning of something far more sinister, a cycle that binds them to the eternal dance of war, where every heartbeat echoes with the promise of more bloodshed, more loss, and perhaps, if the stars align, a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. The night was thick with tension, a palpable presence settling over the battlefield like a heavy fog. The moon hung high, a spectral eye, casting twisted shadows that danced across the scarred earth. I stood there, heart hammering in my chest, the world narrowing to the piercing sound of arrows slicing through the air. It was an eerie lull, punctuated only by the whispers of the wind and the distant cries of men, a symphony of chaos strung taut against the silence. I remember that night vividly, the chill in my bones, the weight of my bow in my hand, and the electric anticipation crackling in the air. It was a moment suspended in time, as if the universe held its breath, waiting. Lysander's eyes shone with desperation, a reflection of his turmoil. He was not just a warrior, he was a father, a husband, a man who had seen too much bloodshed. His hands trembled as he gripped his bow, fingers brushing against the smooth, worn wood. "For them," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, but it echoed around us, a mantra against the encroaching darkness. He was fighting not just for survival, but for the family he had left behind, faces haunting him like ghosts, their laughter stolen by war. The thought clawed at his insides, a guilt that gnawed mercilessly. Each arrow he loosed felt heavy with the weight of his failures, a reminder that he was fighting against an enemy that was as much a part of him as his own blood. Then there was Alina, a fierce spirit hidden beneath layers of grief. She had lost too much, a sister to the ravages of war, a lover to the whims of fate. Her heart was a battleground, love and rage clashing like swords, leaving her raw and exposed. I watched her eyes, fire and ice entwined, as she prepared her own bow, a weapon of retribution. They took her, she breathed, the words escaping her lips like a curse. I will make them pay. With every arrow narked, she was writing a requiem for her sister, crafting a melody of vengeance that resonated in the night stillness. I felt her pain seep into my own skin, a reminder that the arrows we shot were extensions of our very souls, each flight a cry for justice, each impact a piece of our hearts left behind on the ground. The enemy was out there, lurking in the shadows, their intentions as dark as the night itself. We were the silent killers, the unseen harbingers of death, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash our wrath. I remember the first time I released an arrow, the thrill of it, the rush of power surging through me. But that thrill was a double-edged sword, cutting deeper with every shot I took. There was beauty in the way the arrow flew, but also madness in the destruction it left behind. I could see it in Lysander's haunted gaze, the reflection of his soul laid bare. He wasn't just aiming at a target, he was aiming at his past, his regrets, his dreams, all the things that had led him to this moment. Do you remember the stories? Alina's voice broke through the haze, a sudden flash of brightness in the gloom. The ones our mothers told us about heroes and glory. Her laugh was sharp, tinged with bitterness. They never mentioned the blood, the screams, the weight of a life taken. I could almost hear the echo of those tales, once enchanting, now twisted by reality. The truth was that the archers were not celebrated in the songs, they were the ghosts of the battlefield, haunting the living with the burden of their choices. The tension crackled like lightning, and then it came, a surge of bodies, the enemy charging forth like a ravenous tide. My heart raced, a drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. I drew my bow, urging my muscles to obey as the world narrowed down to that single point, the tip of my arrow aimed at the darkness. This was it. This moment. I released, feeling the pulse of life in that fleeting instant. The arrow found its mark, and with it, I felt a hollow victory. It was like a dream unraveling, one where I was not the hero, but the villain, forever stained by the consequences of my actions. I could see the shift in Lysander, the moment his resolve cracked. A scream echoed in the night, his son's name, a desperate invocation that pierced my heart. Time slowed as he stumbled forward, lost in a fog of horror, the battlefield blurring into a nightmare. I felt my breath catch, a visceral horror gripping me as I watched him falter, the weight of loss crashing over him like an unforgiving tide. No. Lysander. Alina's voice, raw with anguish, sent a shiver down my spine. I reached for him, but he was already lost, a ghost in the chaos, the echoes of his family dragging him further into the abyss. The arrows flew like whispers, silent yet deadly, and I was caught in the thrall of it all, the desperation, the haunting cries, the memories that bled into the present. Alina was a whirlwind, firing shot after shot, her pain fueling her fury as she fought not just for vengeance but for the man beside her, who was slipping away into the darkness. In that moment, I understood, we were all just trying to make sense of the chaos, to find purpose in the destruction. Each arrow was a reminder of what we had lost and what we could still protect. And then, in the heart of the storm, I saw it, a flicker of hope through the carnage. A glimmer of something more. I felt the pull of it, the promise of a chance to rewrite our destinies. My breath caught as I narked another arrow, heart pounding, ready to fight not just for survival, but for something greater. It was a sensation more intoxicating than any thrill of victory, the hope that we could change our fates, break the cycle of pain. The night was far from over, and the battle raged on. But there, amidst the chaos, something profound flickered, a silent vow binding us together in the face of despair. We were not just archers, we were voices, echoes of a fight that transcended the moment, a relentless struggle against the shadows closing in around us. And as I drew my bow once more, the world blurred into a single point, love, loss, and the unyielding desire to fight for a brighter dawn. The air trembles with desperation, thick with the scent of damp earth and distant smoke curling through the pines. I can hear the sharp crack of twigs underfoot, a harbinger of doom lurking just beyond the tree line. It's a sound that sends shivers racing down my spine. A figure appears, a silhouette against the charcoal sky. His chest rises and falls like a battered bellows, and I know, he knows, that this moment could unravel everything. "Hold steady," he murmurs, barely a breath escaping his cracked lips. His name is Ewan, a boy forged in grief, his hands trembling but steadying on the longbow, a weapon as much a part of him as his own skin. The bowstring whispers promises only he can hear, a haunting melody braided with fear and resolve. They'll come. They always do. I remember the first time I saw him draw that bow, the way he seemed to dance with it, a seamless extension of his soul. His eyes, fierce and haunted, held the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. An archer, yes, but also a boy longing for redemption. He bears the burden of a mother lost, taken by fire and betrayal. The longbow, carved from an ancient yew tree, bore witness to his tears, each notch a tale of heartbreak and hope. Beside him stands Alina, her heart a fragile bird flitting against a cage of panic. She's the archer's sister, a fierce spirit wrapped in the softness of love and loyalty. I can see her fingers twitching, eyeing the quiver strapped to her back like a lifeline. The arrows, forged in darkness, tip with dreams of vengeance. Each one has a name engraved on its shaft, a memory that haunts her, that haunts us all. If we're to survive this, she breathes, the words weighing heavy on her tongue, we must strike first. I remember those summers, the glow of the sun kissing the fields where we'd play, the laughter weaving through the air like the scent of wildflowers. Those days are gone, buried beneath ash and shadows. Now, fireflies flicker uncertainly in the thickening dusk, mirroring the flicker of hope left in our chests. Suddenly, a rustle, a wild animal or death itself. I feel it clawing at my throat. Ewan's grip tightens on his bow, the wood warm and familiar, as if it could ward off the chaos closing in around us. "Not yet," he whispers, his voice barely a sigh. The silence stretches, taut as a drawn bowstring, until it snaps, an arrow of dread through the heart of the night. Time seems to twist, slipping like sand through fingers. The world narrows, the cosmos shrinking to the space between breaths. I remember a moment, long ago, when the three of us lay beneath a blanket of stars, our dreams scattered like celestial dust. Ewan spoke of becoming a legend, of archers whose names echoed through time, Robin Hood, William Tell. But legends are born in blood and sacrifice, not in the laughter of carefree days. A scream slices through the air, sharp and raw. It's a ghost of a memory, the sound of a life severed, the laughter turned to howls of despair. Ewan's jaw clenches, his gaze flickering to Alina. "We can't let them take us," his voice is a jagged edge. I see the fire in his eyes, the desperation boiling beneath the surface as if he could ignite the very air with the sheer force of his will. I remember the stories we spun around the campfire, tales of archers who could pierce the heavens, who could bend fate to their will. But now, under this oppressive sky, those stories feel like cruel jokes. I look to Alina, and her face is a mask of resolve, yet I see the trembling beneath her skin, the cracks in her armor. They emerge like shadows, spectral figures gliding through the trees, faces obscured but intentions clear. I can feel my heart pounding, a war drum drumming to the rhythm of impending doom. The moon hangs low, a watchful eye, and I realize, the longbow is not just a weapon, it's a lifeline, a bridge between worlds. Ewan will have to make a choice, and I can feel the gravity of it pulling him down, down into the abyss. Now! Alina's voice slices through the tension, sharp as the arrow she knocks to her bow. Ewan's fingers are steady, poised on the string, and for a heartbeat, time stands still. The world holds its breath. Then, chaos erupts. The twang of bowstrings fills the air, the arrows slicing through the night with a purpose only the forgotten could understand. I can see the glint of steel, the flash of eyes wide with shock and fear. Ewan's breath is a storm, fierce and unyielding. Each arrow released is a scream, a memory unleashed into the world, a prayer for vengeance that echoes against the very stars. But the archers are not just hunters, they are haunted, tethered to the ghosts of their past. Alina's arrow finds its mark, and I see the flicker of disbelief cross her face, a rush of exhilaration mingling with the shadow of loss. I remember when we were children, her laughter ringing in the air like the sweetest melody. Now, it's a battle hymn, a requiem for dreams lost. Each shot fired is both a strike against the darkness and a tear in the fabric of their souls. Yuan stands resolute, lost in the rhythm of the fight, the pulse of the bow singing a familiar tune, the tune of survival, of hope, of destruction. The night swallows their cries, time stretching endlessly around them, a canvas splattered with the colors of war. And still they shoot, hearts pounding, breaths shallow, knowing that with every arrow released, they inch closer to the edge of their own sanity, intertwined with the history of those who came before them. Yuan looks to Alina, and in that moment, an unspoken bond weaves between them, a bond forged in tragedy, in the flames of their shared loss. Together, he says, and she nods, determination igniting the fire in her eyes. The confrontation spirals around them, a maelstrom of chaos and courage, fear and fury. The night stretches on, a living entity, and I can feel the weight of time pressing fiercely against my chest as if it too fears the outcome. I remember a time when arrows were just arrows, just wood and feather, but now they have become the lifeblood of survival, an extension of their very souls. I can feel the tension rising, an electric charge in the air, and for a brief, shattering moment, it seems as if the stars themselves hold their breath. The longbow speaks, the twang echoing through the night, a symphony of loss, of resolve, of the haunting call of destiny. I can see it, the heart of the battle, the raw emotion dripping from every shot, every breath. In the flickering shadows, under the weight of the stars, the longbow draws them closer to the inevitable clash. Each heartbeat echoes, each breath weighed down by the gravity of their choices. They are not just archers, they are warriors, guardians of their own fragile humanity, entangled in a web of fate that refuses to let go. And the night, as it deepens, promises no end, only the echo of arrows, the pulse of hearts, and the haunting melody of the longbow as it reverberates through the ages. The echo of gunfire exploded in my ears, a furious symphony of chaos, drowning out all reason. Dust swirled like specters in the air, clinging to my skin, suffocating. Each heartbeat thudded in my chest, a relentless drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. I crouched behind a shattered wall, the remnants of a once proud building now a tomb for aspirations and dreams, both buried beneath the weight of conflict. I remember the way sunlight sliced through the clouds, an ethereal glow illuminating the battlefield, painting everything in hues of horror and beauty. I felt alive and dead, all at once. My hands trembled, fingers clutching the rifle as if it were an extension of my very soul. We had trained for this, of course. We had rehearsed the motions, learned the commands. But nothing can prepare you for the raw, visceral reality of combat, the blood and guts and the smell of fear that lingers like smoke. "Hold the line," shouted Sergeant Reyes, his voice cutting through the cacophony like a knife. He was a mountain of a man, steadfast and scarred, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of battles fought and friends lost. In another life, he'd be cracking jokes over a barbecue, not buried under the weight of a rifle and responsibility. But here, in this hell, he was our leader, holding tight to hope like a lifeline. I could see it in his posture, the way he leaned forward, tense and ready, as if the world could collapse behind him and he wouldn't falter. Then there was Kelly, a fierce spirit tucked into a small frame. Her laughter once bounced off the walls of our barrack, brightening the darkest corners of our lives. But today, her laughter was replaced by a fierce determination, her face pale under layers of grime and sweat. She gritted her teeth, a flash of defiance igniting in her eyes. "We're not leaving anyone behind," she yelled. "Not today." I wanted to believe that, wanted to believe we could be heroes. But the truth clawed at the base of my throat, a bitter pill to swallow. Every second felt like a lifetime, an eternity etched in blood and gunpowder. I caught her gaze, and in that moment, we shared a silent understanding, the fragility of life, the haunting ghosts of choices left unmade. The air shifted, something primal coursed through me. I could taste it, metallic and sharp, mingling with the dust that coated my tongue. I remembered the dreams I had of saving the world, visions of courage wrapped in glory. The cosmos had spun those dreams, bright and tantalizing. Now, those dreams lay shredded at our feet, as broken as the bodies strewn across the battlefield. A sudden explosion shattered the moment, a fireball erupting from nowhere, sending debris flying like the confetti of death. I ducked instinctively, instinct overpowering thought. A scream pierced the air, a sound so raw, so filled with anguish, it clawed at my insides. It was Michael, my best friend. In my mind, I replayed his last joke, a silly pun about the weather, and in that fleeting memory, I felt the last vestiges of joy slink away. "Michael!" I roared, the word tearing from my throat, but the sound was swallowed by the chaos. Desperation seized me, a beast gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I had to move, had to find him. The ground was no longer just dirt and rubble, it was a grotesque tapestry of chaos, a nightmare made manifest. I stumbled forward, each step heavy, laden with dread. Reyes gripped my arm, his face a mask of determination. "You can't go out there. It's a death trap." But how could I not? The tether of friendship, of loyalty, pulled me, tethering me to the spot where laughter had once lived. I fought against the fear, against the panic rising in my throat. "Let me go!" I shouted, shaking free of his grip. I couldn't just stand there, not while Michael's name echoed in my head like a funeral dirge. I plunged into the maelstrom, the world blurring around me, chaos swirling like a dark vortex. Each breath was a labor, each heartbeat an act of rebellion against the fate that clawed at my heels. I remember the cold ground beneath my knees, the sting of the gravel digging into my palms. The shadows danced, flickering in the dying light, playing tricks on my weary mind. What was real? What was a ghost? And then I saw him, Michael, sprawled, his body twisted unnaturally, a marionette with cut strings. The world around me faded, time ceased to exist. My heart cracked open, spilling sorrow, filling the air with the weight of loss. I crawled toward him, fingers trembling, desperate to reach out. I remember the nights we'd shared, the secrets whispered in the dark, the dreams we'd spun together. "Hang on, buddy," I choked out, cradling his head, feeling the warmth seep away. His eyes fluttered open, a flicker of recognition, then nothing. Just silence. And in that moment, I understood the rawness of it all, blood and guts, the visceral reality of combat. It wasn't about heroics or glory, it was about the ghosts we left behind, the weight of our choices, and the scars that etched themselves deep in the fabric of our souls. The world shifted again, the ground trembling as another explosion rocked the earth. Reyes was shouting, orders cutting through the haze, but they fell on deaf ears. My world had collapsed, a cacophony of grief, fear, and raw, unrestrained emotion. I remember the faces, the voices, the laughter that would never echo again. I remember the silence, heavy and suffocating, a void that threatened to swallow me whole. And as the dust settled, I realized that combat was more than a battle against an enemy, it was a battle within, the blood and guts of humanity laid bare, raw and unvarnished. Time blurred, casualties mounting, but I stood there, rooted in sorrow, the horizon stretching endlessly before me. The battle raged on, but in the depths of that chaos, I found clarity. I was but a flicker in the cosmos, but I would carry their memories, their laughter, their love. And as the night loomed heavy, the shadows whispered stories of the fallen, the echoes of their lives mingling with the smoke of war. In this dance of war and loss, I began to understand, the fight was never over. The blood and guts of combat would continue, each heartbeat a reminder of those we loved, a cycle perpetually feeding the darkness. And so, I stood, clutching the remnants of hope and grief, ready, somehow, to face whatever came next. The air screamed. A cacophony of gunfire and the distinct, metallic scent of blood and sweat flooded the senses, an orchestra of chaos. The ground trembled beneath my boots, a heartbeat of its own, rising and falling like the shudders of the human heart, desperate and thrumming. I remember the moment when I first saw Sam, sprawled in the dirt, eyes wide, as if pleading for answers that would never come. I can still catch the glint of terror in his gaze, a reflection of my own internal hell. "Get up!" I screamed, my voice raw, fraying at the edges like the tattered flags we carried. But the silence that followed was thick and suffocating. It wrapped around us, a heavy blanket of dread. The battle raged on, but we were lost in our own world, a war far removed from that acrid smoke and splintering wood. I remember the tremors in my hands, the way they shook as I crouched beside him, every pulse an echo of memories that haunted my sleep. Sam was the kind of guy who could make you laugh even in the dark, a joke here, a quip there, but now he was just a ghost, flickering out. "We're going home," I whispered, but the words felt like lies. Home was an eternity away, buried under mountains of dirt and despair. A bullet whizzed past, and I felt the rush of air, like a lover's breath against my neck, sending shivers down my spine. I could still hear the whispers of those who'd fallen beside me, their voices echoing in the chambers of my mind. "You'll never forget us." They were right, this was a war of remembrance. Each face a tattoo on the inside of my eyelids, a gallery of grief and guilt that refused to fade. "Can you hear it?" Sam's voice trembled, raw with pain. The tremors in his body were a painful reminder of how fragile we really were. The silence. I nodded, though I could hardly hear myself think over the screams of the wounded. The silence was deafening, a void filled with the ghosts of choices made and chances lost. We were both trapped in the web of war, spinning slowly, helplessly, toward the inevitable. The weight of my rifle was comforting, familiar. It felt like a part of me, a twisted extension of my own yearning for control. Yet it also bore the burden of blood, the blood of friends and foes alike. I wanted to scream at the world, to tell it how unjust this all felt, that each pull of the trigger was a thread that unraveled lives and dreams. "Do you remember?" Sam's breath was a ghost of its former self, rasping against the cold air. "Do you remember that night by the fire?" The flickering flames danced in my memory, casting shadows on our laughter, the warmth of camaraderie wrapping around us like an old, worn blanket. "Yeah," I replied, my voice a brittle whisper. "You were trying to impress Claire." His ghost of a smile broke through the haze of pain. "She thought I was an idiot." "Yeah, well, I wanted to say something meaningful, but the words crumbled in my throat. I had never been good at saying goodbye. And then, like a wild animal, the battle surged again. Explosions shattered the moment, and the world collapsed in on itself. I felt the blast wave slamming into my chest, a visceral reminder of our mortality. I threw myself over Sam, the instinct to protect overriding everything else. Time warped, each second stretched like taffy, thick and heavy, filled with the screams of the dying. My memories flickered like faulty lights, moments of laughter, of hope, of all the things I had taken for granted. Each breath became a countdown, each heartbeat a reminder that this could be the last. I felt the air thicken, a suffocating presence, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "Stay with me," I begged, clutching Sam's wrist, his skin cool under my fingers. His eyes fluttered, battling the weight of sleep, but a flicker of determination ignited within them. "I can't," he choked out, "I can't breathe." "Just hold on," I cried, panic clawing at my throat like a wild beast. "We're getting out of this." I could feel the pulse of fear rising within me, thicker than the smoke, sharper than the shrapnel that flew through the air. The ghosts of our past swirled around us, witnesses to our struggle, and I was left battling against fate, against the universe that seemed intent on tearing us apart. "Tell Claire," Sam's voice trailed off, a whisper swallowed by the cacophony of war, but the weight of his unsaid words pressed against me like a vice. I wanted to scream, to rage against the cruelty of it all. But all I could do was nod through the tears blurring my vision, feeling the weight of his life slipping through my fingers like sand. A sudden crack echoed through the air, and time resumed its brutal pace. I saw the flash, a dark figure against the chaos, the enemy's silhouette carving through the smoke. Instinct kicked in, I raised my rifle, heart pounding in my ears, adrenaline surging through my veins. But something held me back, the haunting image of Sam's face, his plea for life etched into my mind. Just let me go," he rasped, the weight of his words cutting deeper than any bullet could. And in that moment, I felt the world splinter, the edges of reality fracturing like glass. "Don't you dare say that!" I shouted, but it was a fragile scream, a threadbare promise in the heart of despair. We were drowning in our own choices, a whirlwind of chaos, memories, and shadows. The universe continued its indifferent spin, the stars watching from above, distant and uncaring. Yet, in the trenches of this hell, we were human, flawed and raw, buried under the weight of our own fighting souls. Stay with me, I whispered again, but the words felt hollow, echoing against the dark expanse of uncertainty. The battle raged on, but in that moment, there was only us, two souls caught in the tempest of war, and the ghost of what could have been.